Going live now.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, I think we're live on YouTube now. Welcome everybody to the second day of Digital Coptic. Thanks for joining us here today. We have 6 talks scheduled for today. So because we're already past 10, I'm going to start with the schedule directly. Our first talk is by Selmi Agawa, Marco Büchler, and Heike Behlmer on digital text reuse detection in Coptic literature, a progress report. So are you presenting?
Yeah, wait a minute.
You should have permission.
Yeah.
All right, excellent.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Can you see it?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. Okay, hello. Today we saw Miyagawa, Marco Büchler, and Heike Behlmer from the University of Göttingen in Germany. We present digital text reuse detection in Coptic literature, a progress report. The main theme is a digital humanities and corpus linguistics study on Chenut and Bessa's text reuses. Text reuses mean, for example, quotations and allusions. In this study, we would like to clarify first formal aspects of quotation, namely how they changed quotations and how they use quotation signals. Second, we would like to find unknown text reuses, and it leads to the evaluation of our text reuse detection tool, Tracer, and contribution to Coptic linguistics and Septuagint studies. Third, we would like to explain the function of quotations in the monastic educational context. This study was conducted at the project called Biblical Interpretation and Educational Traditions in the Coptic-speaking Egyptian Christianity of late antiquity, Chenute Canon 6. This project is belonging to German Research Foundation, DFG's Collaborative Research Center, Sonderforschungsbereich, SFB 1136, Education and Religion in Cultures of the Mediterranean and its Environment from Ancient to Medieval Times and to the Classical Islam. I'm working with Heike Behlmer and Julien Delier in this project. ETRAP is a collaborator on the technical side of this project. ETRAP is short for Electronic Text Reuse Acquisition Project. The principal investigator is Marco Büchler. It was selected as an early career research group funded by the German Federal Ministry of Education and Research. The fund continued from 2015 to 2019. It produces Tracer, a program to detect text reuses digitally. The field of text reuse studies has developed parallel to the evolution of computational linguistics. In the 1980s, the technology of data mining to analyze especially numbers in data prevailed, and from the late 1980s, the technology of text mining to analyze the text became popular. Moreover, at the same time, the technology of the natural language processing was developed. In the 1990s, there appeared several programs to detect plagiarism. In the late 2000s, programs of text reuse detections for classical literature appeared in the field of digital humanities. The representative programs are Tesserae and Tracer. Tesserae began in 2006. It is the earliest text reuse detection program for historical texts written in Latin. Tesserae found many text reuses unknown to the scholars. For example, in Lucan Civil War, Tesserae found 93 text reuses from Virgil's Aeneid, among which 46 are unknown in previous studies. Text reuse analysis is a field of computational linguistics. Possible text reuses are quotations and allusions, but also idiomatic phrases, paraphrasing, ghostwriting, maxims, and so on. Quotations and allusions are probably the most common or best researched, but even today, the definitions of both are still debated. Quotation generally presuppose a minimum length of the string of words quoted from a source text. This time, we focus only on quotations in the syntactic text reuses. In the late 2000s, Marco Büchler, a German computer scientist, started developing Tracer, a new text reuse detection software which can be applied to all the languages and can manage with big data. It was further developed in the ITRA project at the Institute of Computer Science of the University of Göttingen. So far, Tracer has obtained excellent results in various languages, such as ancient Greek, Latin, Arabic, Hebrew, English, German, Tibetan, and now Coptic. These are the results of running Tracer on the Thesaurus Linguae Graecae. One thick line is the entire work of one author, and blue and red vertical lines are text reuses by other authors. Red is more frequently reused part. This figure shows the predominance of the reuses from Plato and Aristotle. To adapt Tracer to Coptic, our project collaborated with the ETRAP team. Our basic text is Canon 6 by Shenute, the third abbot of the White Monastery in the 4th to 5th centuries. The canons, based on Stephen Emmer's reconstruction of Shenute's literary corpus, are mostly concerned with topics of monastic discipline. The main topics of Canon 6 are accusations against Shenute of excessive force and his defense, Shenute's illness, problems of the female community, and monastic rules. Canon 6 includes a minimum of 5 works, but probably more works were there. The codices are fragmentary and there are many lacunae. This is a pie chart of the number of known pages of codices of Canon 6. This chart is divided by organizations which keep the pages. The manuscripts of Canon 6 are preserved in 6 codices dispersed in many museums and libraries. As customary in the case of White Monastery codices, Paris Bibliothèque Nationale de France has the biggest number of known pages. The next organization which preserves pages of Canon 6 most is Biblioteca Nazionale di Napoli. We gathered the photos of these pages with the massive help of Diliana Atanasova and made digital editions of these pages on virtual manuscript room. Also, we made digital editions of codices A and B of letters and sermons of Besa. Besa is a successor of Shenute. Differently from Shenute Canon 6, the organization which contains pages of codices A and B of Besa the most is the British Library in London. The next is the Biblioteca Nazionale di Napoli, and then Paris Bibliothèque Nationale de France. This is the workflow of this project. In the pre-processing part, we made transcription using OCR or Unicode converter or manually directly from manuscripts, annotated philologically in TI XML on virtual manuscript room, and parsed morphologically and syntactically by tokenizer, lemmatizer, part of speech tagger, and universal dependencies parser provided by Coptic scriptorium. In the processing part, we ran Tracer on the corpus and found text reuses. And finally, in the post-processing part, we visualized the results of Tracer. A considerable part of the text is available in old editions, mostly by Amelino, Leipold, and Kuhn. We did not only manually transcribe these, but also extracted the text data digitally using our own OCR technology. With the computer scientist Kirill Bulat, we created an optical character recognition process for Coptic for this project. This Coptic OCR uses OcroPy, an OCR program with an artificial neural network, which is these days often used for the machine learning. We adjusted it and trained it for printed Coptic text, and the accuracy rate reached 99% for the printed text. We heard the further excellent development of this Coptic OCR from Elise Sofia Linke yesterday. If we have an all digital transcription of Coptic in the ASCII rendition of Coptic alphabet, we can also use the converter of Coptic scriptorium made by Amir Zerdes, Caroline Schroeder, and me. This letter on the left-hand side looks like Coptic alpha, but it is encoded as a Roman A, but just displayed as a Coptic alpha. This often happens digital Coptic text written in odd fonts. We need to convert this text into Coptic Unicode, which is encoded as the Coptic alphabet. For manuscripts of the texts of Shenute Canon 6 and Besa, we first gathered digital images with the help of Diliana Atanasova, put them on the virtual manuscript room of the Coptic Old Testament project, and made a transcription in the TI XML format. Then we ran Coptic scriptorium's NLP pipeline on these transcriptions and tokenized the text. The recent result of this tokenization, according to its creator Amir Zerdes, is 98.82% on average. Through this process, you can do tagging part of speech, syntactic annotation, lemmatization, and tokenization. Then with pressing the process button, you can generate an SGML file, which can be used in TIXML. On Coptic Scriptorium, you can show your corpus passed by Coptic NLP service with various layers of part of speech, lemmata, language of origin, translation, etc. Also, you can show the syntactic trees within the framework of universal dependencies. We can also use the Coptic WordNet created by our team from Oslo, Singapore, and Göttingen. A WordNet is a conceptual dictionary. It contains the information of synonyms, hyponyms, etc. Especially the data of co-hyponyms will improve the results of tracer. Co-hyponyms are lexical entries which share the same hyponyms. For example, cat is a co-hyponym of dog under the hyponym animal. The results of the WordNet were published in Slaughter et al. 2019. We are currently working on applying Coptic WordNet to Tracer to detect more semantic text reuses like allusions in the future. Our next presentation is given by Laura Slaughter on this Coptic WordNet. To process Tracer, we are using a Rudel. This is a high-performance computer at the Institute of Computer Science in Göttingen. Although it is very heavy, you can also run it on your own computer. Tracer itself is a Java program with 700 algorithms. To modify algorithms, one should edit the configuration file written in XML. Tracer has no graphical user interface, so one needs to run it on the command line. After running Tracer, we use a visualization program named Travis. Two of the most representative visualizations are the dot plot view and collation view. This is the dot plot view. Circles are text reuse candidates, which Tracer found. Green is more plausible. This is the collation view. You can see which words the two texts share and which they do not share. Here are the results of Tracer on the text reuses between the Sahidic Bible from the Coptic Old Testament project and Shenute Canon 6 or the works of Besa. The number of text reuse candidates is 13,800 between the Sahidic Bible and Besa. Those candidates are too many, so we decided to concentrate on one book from the Bible, and this time we chose the Psalms. The Psalms are one of the most frequently cited biblical books by Egyptian monastic leaders, including Shenut and Besa, and very well preserved in Coptic. Eugen Horn classifies the types of the Coptic Psalm texts. Manuscripts of the Sahidic Psalter are the most frequently attested among the manuscripts of the Sahidic translation of the Old Testament, even if only two major manuscripts are completely preserved. We ran Tracer on the collated and prepared text of Shenute's Canon 6 and Besa, and the new base text of the Psalms in the Coptic Old Testament project. In this run, 629 text reuse candidates between Besa and Psalms and 423 between Canon 6 and Psalms were detected. Kuhn's edition and previous studies on Besa already try to detect as many text reuses as possible, which can be a good calibration and control tool for Tracer. Between Besa and the Psalms, 4 quotations unknown to the previous studies, 6 quotations unknown to the previous studies were found. Between Psalms and Shenute's Canon 6, we found 14 new quotations, and the result will be published in the proceedings of the International Congress for Coptic Studies. Tracer found many idiomatic text reuses in both Shenute and Besa. It takes much time to eliminate the idiomatic text reuses. Representative idiomatic text reuses are fear the Lord, evil in the place of good, before God, etc. Eliminating these idiomatic text reuses, we found quotations unknown to the previous studies. I will show some examples here. This is one of the examples of the unknown text reuses found by Tracer. In the text, there is no indication of a quotation, and the auxiliary verb was changed in the target text. Also, Besa deleted the prepositional phrase ente he. Probably it is because in this way is obvious in the context of the psalm, but when it is reused in the context of Besa, it is no longer clear. The target text of Besa translates to, and all men from whom you will get no gain in this place, you will pursue with your whirlwind and vex with your wrath, and the fire shall devour them. The source text is Psalm chapter 82, verse 16, translates to, you will pursue them in this way with your whirlwind and vex them with your wrath. This is the text reused immediately after the example we saw. Also, this was unknown to the previous studies. The target text of Besa translates to, and all men from whom you will get no gain in this place, you will pursue with your whirlwind and vex with your wrath, and the fire shall devour them. The source text is Psalm chapter 20, verse 10. It translates to, you will make them like an oven of fire. At the time of your presence, Lord, you will vex them with your wrath, and the fire shall devour them. Besa changed future one into conjunctive here. This is a quotation in the same paragraph, but again, unknown to the previous studies. The text of Besa translates to, the angel of the covenant shall take them and remove them outside the wall of the community, and shall moreover disperse them, even as the dust which the wind scatters upon the face of the earth. Tracer indicated this text was taken from Psalm chapter 1, verse 4. The text can be translated as, this is not like the ungodly. It is not so, but they will be like the dust which the wind scatters upon the face of the earth. Besa deverbalized ertuhe into a prepositional phrase, entuhe. Those three newly found quotations are inside Besa fragment 4, chapter 1. This passage has 5 text releases from the Psalms, then 3 newly found quotations from Psalms, 1 quotation from Psalm found by Merino, and 1 allusion from Exodus. First, he quotes Psalm chapter 82, verse 16, then Psalm chapter 20, verse 10. He inserted an allusion from Exodus chapter 23, verse 20 to 23, and next a quotation from Psalm chapter 1, verse 4. Here comes a quotation signal as it is written. Then finally he puts a quotation Psalm chapter 108, verse 17. The quotation signal as it is written was previously thought to mark only the next quotation. However, since Tracer found 3 text releases before it, thus this phrase can also mark the 3 before it. In Chanute and Besa, one of the most frequently used phrases to introduce a quotation is entre et ser. In the way which is written, I call phrases introducing a quotation index phrase, or QIP in short. In these QIPs, there is also a variation like entre et ser, but in this talk, I will focus on the most frequent one, entre et ser. As often but not consistently, Chanute uses the phrase as it is written to introduce or conclude scripture quotations. In the following slides, I will further discuss the formal characteristics of the quotation index phrase in Chanute and Besa. I found 49 uses of entre et ser in Chanute's Canon 6. For example, this is one of the quotations which was found by Teresa between the Psalms and Canon 6, but unknown to the previous studies. Here, this is a quotation from Psalm chapter 32, verse 15. This is one of the examples of previous, preposed QIP, but because it is he who has shaped their hearts, as it is written in the Psalms, here it is a quotation index phrase, and the one who himself shaped their hearts. In the next example, the quotation index phrase is inserted in a quotation. The man looks at the face alone, as it is written, it is at the heart that God looks. Here, the quotation index phrase is inserted in a quotation from the 1 Samuel 16:7. We analyzed all the examples of entre et ser in Canon 6 and Besa. The corpus size is 49,000 tokens in Chanute's Canon 6 and 60,000 tokens in Besa's letters and sermons. Besa's corpus is 23% bigger than Chanute's Canon 6 corpus. The graph below shows that every preposed QIPs has a complementizer J in Chenute and Besa as expected, and all the postpodes and inserted QIPs have no complementary J except those having evolve J. Evolve J here is a subordinator, and I don't consider evolve J as a use of complementizer. Interestingly, Chenute tends to use more postposed QIPs in Canon 6, while Besa used more preposed QIPs. In Chenute, the post-post QIP construction occupies 64%, but in Besa, 14%. This difference is a stylistic difference. However, it shows that Chenute tends to use quotations, mostly biblical quotations, as his argument more directly. Syntactically, preposed QIPs are different from the inserted and postposed QIPs, as shown in these syntactic trees with phrase structure. In the preposed QIP construction, the actual quotation is on the right-hand side and it is at the bottom, while in postposed QIP construction, it is on the left-hand side and it is on top. Inserted QIP construction is similar to the postposed QIP construction, but the QIP is inserted inside the quotation. In the preposed QIP construction, the quotation just supports the argument, while in postposed or inserted QIP construction, the quotation equals the argument. Also, even in the preposed pattern, Chenute uses incomplete quotation as it is written. And that complete quotation pattern often in Chenute's Canon 6, this pattern was attested 4 times, while Besa only once. Besa's corpus used here is much bigger than Chenute's Canon 6, and use of preposed QIP by Besa is more than Chenute's. But Chenute uses this construction more in his preposed QIP construction. Actually, the example I showed is one of the examples of this formula, which Chenute uses often. The underlined part is the incomplete quotation. First, Chenute writes an altered quotation as his argument, evo rho j entov pentaf place n het, because it is he who has shaped the hearts. Then a quotation index phrase, and then a complete quotation, the one who himself shaped their hearts. Chenute here first used an incomplete quotation with that Mawaf himself, and then he put a QIP, and finally put a complete quotation. From this analysis, we would like to conclude that Chenute incorporates the biblical quotations more skillfully than Besa. The project of conclusions, the project of SFB 1136 and ETRAP have collaborated working on text reuses in Chenute's Canon 6 and Besa's letters and sermons. We found quotations unknown to the previous studies in both corpora. With newly found quotations, we conducted a study on the location of entre etzech. Besa uses more preposed entre etzech than Chenute. Perhaps this indicates that Chenute embedded biblical quotations more skillfully than Besa in monastic educational discourse. Through application of Coptic OneNet to Teresa is the next challenge. And this is the bibliography. This is also bibliography. And thank you so much.
Thank you, so for this very interesting work. We have a few minutes for questions. Please type them into the chat and I'll field them in the order that they're given. While we're waiting for that, I guess I can ask something. So first of all, this is really interesting, and I really hope that you'll release the Chenute Canon 6 and Besa material, because this is a huge amount of Coptic material that's not available digitally. The Besa that we have published in Scriptorium is just about 5,000 tokens. Looks like you have about 60,000. We'd love to have that available online. So that's maybe just a comment. Then something that would interest me as a linguist. So you're saying that Besa and Chenute have different preferences with topicalizing or postponing the quotative index. I was wondering if you've looked at whether they do that with other grammatical devices. For example, if they have different kinds of preferences for something like, say, fronting or dislocation with alt key and then postponing the subject within key. Right, so sometimes you say prome afsot versus afsot and key prome, right? So both of these are possible. And if it turns out that they have the same preference for those, then it might show something grammatical about Chenute and Besa, namely that one of them likes to topicalize and the other one likes to write dislocate. Versus if it's only applying to this then that's really just kind of a stylistic independent bubble. I'd be interested if it matches.
Yeah, sure. This is totally interesting. We didn't research the dislocation, the difference of the dislocation between Shinut and Besa, but we should research it. Yeah, I'm very interested in dislocation. For example, Puangelos of Sotem versus Puangelos Sotem versus of Sotem Enchi Puangelos, etc. Maybe there are such differences in the style between Shinut and Besa, but we don't know. We didn't research it, but yeah, we should import our corpora of Shinut Canon 6 and Besa into Coptic scriptorium, and we should figure out with the Anis query language.
Yeah, the syntax trees will show you things like dislocation. And I know for other authors, I've had a look, for example, that pseudo-Athanasius, one of the things that struck me is this frequency of the pattern apromesotem, which is otherwise relatively rare, actually. Yeah, I'd be very interested in that. I'm getting a lot of people on the chat wanting the slides. We're going to be offering to put the slides up on the website after the workshop, but of course nobody has to. If you would like for your slides to be shared, then we're very happy to put them on the workshop website after the workshop. Let's see what else we have. Heike Beelma is saying she's proofreading the transcriptions from this work for publication. That's great. Slides. Other questions except for where you can get the slides?
Yeah.
Yes, the slides are also on the YouTube video, but
Yeah,
you
sure.
know, it would be easier to just be able to browse them. Other questions about textual reuse or eTracer? So Frank Feda is asking, a crucial question is with authors like Athanasius if their text is only a translation from Greek. I didn't think that pseudo-Athanasius was a translation from Greek, but it's worth checking. Even so, for something like subject placement, since there are no Greek correspondence to these patterns, Greek doesn't have a. So a transfer kind of argument saying they prefer apromes sotem versus prome sotem because of the Greek is a bit hard to explain because the subject precedes the verb in both cases, and there's no Greek equivalent, so it's hard to explain as a transfer. For postponing, yes, that's something that you can also do in Greek.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think Eitan Grossman is studying it, but yeah, I don't know what he think about it, but I should ask him. Yeah.
I mean, another effect is chronology, I guess. This location becomes more and more preferred in Coptic as time goes on, and related languages of the region do it very consistently later. So, for example, Hausa, which probably has the exact same developmental history as Coptic in terms of word order, in all attested history, no longer allows the subject to be placed after the auxiliary, but probably did in some prehistoric stage.
Yeah, yeah. I also found more right dislocation with J in, I think it's J in Lycopolitan. Enki is J in Lycopolitan, right? I'm not sure, but J in Lycopolitan or NJ in Bohairic, I think, but J in Lycopolitan, I think. But I found more right dislocation with this nominative preposition. May I call that in that way? In Lycopolitan Gospel of John, I once I did a research comparing comparing the the numbers of the right dislocations, right dislocation in Sahidic and Lycopolitan, and I used the Lycopolitan Gospel of John. It's L it's L5, I think, Lycopolitan one, and yeah, I found more right dislocations in Lycopolitan than in Sahidic.
For the same gospel.
Yeah,
So that's a really good control because it's very genre dependent. And narrative in Sahidic you find in he almost ubiquitously, but it really depends on the genre quite a lot.
Yeah. Also, Gospel of John is very nice because very many dialects have Gospel of John. So, as Christian Askeland wrote in his monograph.
All right, I'm not seeing any other questions right now, so feel free to post things in the chat and so can get back to you later. Now we're going to move on to our second talk of the day, which is by Laura Slaughter again. So Luis Morgado da Costa, myself, Heike Belmer, and Hugo Lundhaug, an overview of the Coptic WordNet project. And I believe Laura will be presenting. Laura?
Yes, I will be presenting. Yeah, thank you very much for the introduction. So I will just share my screen now. Let me see if I can do that. Oh, I can share this one. Yes. Do you all see my slides? Let me see. Yeah. Okay. Let me start to play them. Just a second. And I'm also going to start the timer. So thank you very much for having me. I'm going to give an overview of the Coptic WordNet project. And this has been a collaboration between Oslo, Singapore, Germany, and Georgetown in the US. I hope to get through all these topics, so hopefully I don't go too fast or too slow. So I will first discuss just a brief overview of WordNet. So what is a WordNet? And then I will answer some more specific questions about WordNet. So how do these differ from a dictionary or a lexicon? And after this brief introduction, then I will talk a little bit about how we made the Coptic WordNet. And then I will continue with what you can actually expect to do with it, and then also discuss some of our improvements and future plans. So what is a WordNet? WordNet is actually, it's a very old project. Started in the mid-1980s by a psychologist named George Miller. And his goal was to establish psycholinguistics as an independent field of research. He was at Princeton. So the first WordNet is called the Princeton WordNet. It's an English language WordNet. It's a very large lexical database of English containing nouns, verbs, adjectives, and adverbs, which are grouped into sets. These sets are called synsets. So these are sets of cognitive synonyms. So each synset expresses a distinct concept. The synsets are interlinked. So there are a lot of linking between these concepts by means of conceptual, semantic, and lexical relations. The English Princeton WordNet covers 117,000 concepts and over 158,000 English words, and it's incomplete. Words were assigned to lexical categories when this thing was constructed. So nouns, verbs, adjectives, and adverbs. There was a lot of manual labor that went into the Princeton WordNet. They used a corpus called the Brown corpus in order to begin construction of this. And also George Miller's wife also typed in things from encyclopedias. So there are other classes of concepts which came later, determiners and other function words like pronouns, auxiliary words. Conjunctions are coming soon. So this is still a work in progress. Prepositions are still out, but it's a point of discussion. And you can see, I just made a screenshot of the online search interface so that you can see some of the lexical relations between word forms. So for example, there is a link between happiness and happy. So there are also semantic relations holding between the word meanings, and you can also get inferred relationships. So all the male children of my mother are my brothers, and the shark is a fish and a fish is an animal, then a shark is an animal. So you can traverse this hierarchy, which So has done in his, or actually So would like to do in the Tracer project. We're still working on this. So you can get hypernyms, hyponyms, meronyms, holonyms, with the verbs, also troponyms and entailment. Oh, I cannot click through. Oh, I've had a technical problem here. Can you still hear me? Ah, good. Yeah. Can everyone still hear me? Yeah, good. I had a bit of a technical glitch there, it seems. So there's an online search interface for the Princeton WordNet, and in the interest of time, I will just show you that you can get an overview of what's in there. There's more to it. There's other information in something called lexicographer's files. You can also get domain categories as well. You can get sentence examples, for instance. So if you are interested in reading more, then I would recommend that you start with Christian Falbaum's book on WordNet, or that you go to the Global WordNet Association proceedings. The link for the online search interface is on this slide. And by the way, I will make these slides available because there are quite a lot of references and links that people might be interested in having. There's further information on the actual structure and schemas. The most important ones are with the group in Singapore, because this is the group. Global WordNet Association is headed by Francis Bond, and he is at Singapore. So the other two links, joining Open Lingual WordNet project, there's a lot of information there about the structure and the organization itself, and you can get the schema information. So what is the difference between WordNet and Lexicon? The biggest difference is that the WordNet introduces the concept of a concept. So you have these synsets, and the synset IDs, they are, you have the synset ID is the concept itself. So the meaning of is not based on the definition, although every concept has a definition written for it, but the meaning is in the synonym list. So another difference is that the WordNet links these concepts and provides a hierarchy to traverse. And in addition, because there are so many different WordNets in different languages, you have the potential to link to many other languages beyond the translations in one dictionary. So there are very many other WordNets. There's modern language WordNets, and then there are subgroups of them also, which are connected to the synset IDs, like you have Euro WordNet and Indian language WordNet. The Global WordNet Association maintains a list, but it's not complete. So if you're curious, does this WordNet exist? You might just want to do a Google search. There's Ancient Greek, there's Latin, there's Arabic, there's Quranic Arabic WordNet, Hebrew, Middle Ancient Chinese I found, and Sanskrit. So the Global WordNet Association, they exist to promote the standardization of specification of the WordNets for all languages. And part of their work is that they have created something called the Common Interlingual Index, otherwise known as CHILI, for interlinking these different wordlets of different languages. It's kind of a universal index of meaning. And so they are interested in development of a common representation for WordNet data, which is why they give the schemas. And they are doing studies in lexical semantics. So WordNet is a kind of output of this worldwide research. So they promoted development of guidelines and methodologies for building word nets and give like explicit criteria and definitions for verifying the relations, which is why Louise came into the Coptic WordNet project. So the Common Interlingual Index, so this is a flat list of concepts with no lemmas and no structures. It officially has no parts of speech. It only exists in relation to the other word nets. So it provides you this Chile ID. The IDs are persistent. If you are interested in reading more about this Chile list of concepts, then I refer you to this paper by Francis Bond. The reason why they started with Chile is that many times word nets are in order to jumpstart them, instead of doing a lot of manual work for each language that you want to make, you basically base it off the Princeton WordNet. But then you end up with the problem that that you are English oriented. So for example, in Dutch, certain English words were just not lexicalized. So they didn't want to introduce these into the Dutch WordNet. And so they want to, the importance of the Chile is to drop this assumption that if something exists in English, then it should exist in another language. So I became interested in this. I became interested in the word nets because of this multilingual aspect. And before I did the Coptic WordNet, I started to look at the Princeton WordNet because I wanted to see actually how you could use these multilingual WordNet environments for scholarly work on sacred texts. And I was very interested in abstract religious concepts. So I looked at Princeton WordNet with a PhD student named Wenji, who was at Singapore. And we saw a lot of errors. I mean, the Princeton WordNet was based on corpora. I mean, it wasn't based on theological text, so it's incomplete, but it's very skewed towards Christianity. And Wenji had a very strong interest in Buddhism, so we looked at some of the errors in the Princeton WordNet and in the structure and in the definitions, and this paper was the result. So I added this so I have a little bit of background on my own interests. There are also other extensions to WordNet that you can use. So you can get tags for tagging diachronic meaning change or tags for orthographic variation. And also to note is that you're not, the WordNet structures are not predefined. So you can contribute to add additional tags as needed, like if you need region or period. So now I get started on the real topic that we all came here for. This is the Coptic WordNet. So we have made the first version of the Coptic WordNet. And I presented this last year. It was presented at the Global WordNet Conference in Poland last July, almost exactly this time last year. So if you would like to get the full paper and see those slides, those are all up at the University of Oslo website. And then you can take a closer look at our methods. You can also get the data. This is on GitHub. To get the whole Coptic WordNet is available on GitHub. So the license for this is CC BY. And the GitHub contains files in two formats. You have one format which can be used by a Python natural language toolkit. So in order to use this Coptic WordNet, then you will need to use it in Python. And also there is a format for Chile. So you do get a list of Chile IDs. Okay, so how did we make this and what does it look like? So the Coptic WordNet was based on 3 different data sources. We had the Coptic Dictionary Online, which gave us translations to English, French, and German. We had Marcion, which gave us English, French, German, Czech, and Greek. And then we also had the Greek loanword list from the DDGLC project. And then we had translations in all these different languages. So we also have WordNet in English, Greek. So we had modern Greek and ancient Greek WordNet, and we had French WordNet and German WordNet and Czech WordNet. Luis from Singapore, from the Global WordNet Association, he had a project in which he was looking at something he calls multilingual sense intersection. And this is how he created the Coptic WordNet. We have, it's an automatic process, and he uses a ranking procedure. So he asked for each Coptic lemma, what is the likelihood that a Coptic lemma X belongs to each of the meanings or within that concept or scene set provided by the aligned lemmas in each language. So like each of these circles is like language A, language B, language C. These are the word nets and the concepts that are available in each of those word nets. And so he asked for each Coptic lemma that you insert in, what's the likelihood that that Coptic lemma belongs to concept 1 or concept 2. So for example, one Coptic lemma had 9 possible concepts in this diagram, and concept 1 has the highest ranking because it's covered in all the different word nets. Concepts suggested by more languages have a higher chance of being correct. The more matching lemmas in the set, the more likely it is to be correct. Introduced into his algorithm, he has metrics to rank. So you have the number of individual lemmas matched in each language, a part of speech congruency, and something language concept saturation level, which I'm not exactly sure what that is, how he calculates this. But if you'd like a full description of this method, then it's best to contact Luis directly. He hasn't written it up yet as a paper. But I think he has actually some further information he can provide. After we did this, we ended up with a huge list, right? Because it's an automated process with rankings. And then we needed to do some manual checking to see, like, did these things match correctly? And we had the idea that, that the more languages that match, then we thought, oh yes, we'll be more certain about that. But we still need to do some manual checking with experts. So we gave a list of some of the outputs. The output's actually huge, so we only used 300 lemmas. And what we asked was, can you fill in 0, 1, or question mark? So a 1 means that you attest the existence of the candidate sense. So the lemma is known to include the meaning proposed by the candidate synset. Or 0, you reject the possibility that the candidate lemma could be used in that sense, or you are uncertain. So basically what you're saying is that I've seen this lemma used in a text with this meaning. That's a 1. 0, I've never seen this lemma used in a text with that meaning, or question mark, I'm not sure. Oh, again, I'm getting a problem. Oh, there, yes. I think I have to click, yeah. So in the end, so we have a Coptic WordNet with the following coverage. There are 13,000 synsets, so 13,000 noun concepts, 7,491 verbs, a little over 3,000 adjectives. This satellite adjective, just ignore this category, it's a strange thing. 737 adverbs, and yeah, then there were 22 other synset concepts, and for a total of little to over 25,000 synsets. And then the number of senses, or the number of lemmas in these synsets, there was a total of 218,000. So I will say something about this coverage. So these senses or lemmas are distributed among these 25,000 synsets fairly well across different parts of speech. So they cover about 77% of the list of 500 core word senses in the Princeton WordNet, which is like the usual coverage for a WordNet. So with the results, for example, from ancient Greek or other WordNets, which are for ancient languages. So this is pretty average. We have about 7 senses per nominal synset and 12 senses per verbal synset. But I think we may have so many senses because a single lemma can take so many different forms and have different spelling variations. So we need to take a look at this in future iterations. These are the results from the evaluation, which I think this slide should have come after I finished the evaluation part, but sorry about the not being in the right order. And with this, we calculated something. We calculated union and we calculated intersection. So with the evaluation, the union was that if either of the reviewers said, one, I attest that I've seen this lemma in a text, then we said, okay, then someone has seen it, so it must be right. But with the intersection, both of them had to say, I've seen it. And we had several different evaluators with a lot of, they had read different kinds of Coptic text. So just because one maybe has seen it, maybe the other evaluator maybe hadn't read those same texts. So that's why we had these two different measures, union and intersection. And then our hypothesis was correct, that when you increase the number of language as input, then you get more correct assignment of lemma to the correct synset. So, I have to check my time. But I have a couple more slides here about the applications of WordNet. So I hope I can have maybe another 5 minutes. Yes.
I think we should just manage that, but you'll have little time for questions.
Right. Yes. So application of WordNet. What can you do with this? And like I mentioned earlier, you have many multilingual possibilities. You can generate a new lexicon to another language that you didn't have in the original dictionaries. And with the Global WordNet Association, you have a robust language documentation. So you can study the language from a linguistics perspective, and you're getting 30 plus years of making a WordNet structure. Though it's a big commitment to make a WordNet. It's a really a long-term commitment. Our Coptic WordNet is, yeah, it's not, it can still, we still need to do quite a bit of work on this. I'm gonna skip this slide. Yes, so Tracer. This is also an application, but you've heard So's talk. So he was using the WordNet hierarchies to traverse and do replacements of words to look for paraphrasing. So I won't read everything from this slide. Another application of the WordNet is to do some word sense tagging, so you can make multilingual comparisons, to use Chile to create new contextualized conceptualized that would be interesting for other languages. So what is a bank for Coptic speakers? And also what I'm personally interested in is diachronic change and conceptual shift. So concept alignments between other languages can be interesting for Coptic's context. So looking to how would you measure conceptual shift or maybe flow of ideas over time. And I have a list here of more immediate plans, such as we want to link to the Coptic dictionary online. We need to do a larger evaluation. The last evaluation didn't really have a balanced sample. We need to do further evaluation. More text reuse. We need to create and annotate a sense tagged corpus alongside the WordNet to gain work frequency information, to test for coverage and review concepts in the context. And we need funding. So I must apply for funding. And I have this wish list, additional work with Tracer, more text reuse applications, more digital humanities work to create better resources for working on scholarly texts. Like to provide a tool for study of Coptic related language evolution and concept drift. And different multilingual projects with the AGWN is the ancient Greek word net. And unfortunately it seems to be abandoned, but maybe someone will adopt it. And maybe Egyptian, I don't know. And I think we need more instructions for implementation and perhaps some Python scripts for defined tasks and a more user-friendly visual way to work with the word net. And that's it. Yeah, so I think I barely squeezed it into the time given. Yeah.
Thank you, Laura.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
We're not doing too bad for time. There's time for one or two quick questions. I'm seeing in the chat from Smahan Abul Asad, what are the Arabic words quoted in Coptic?
I don't, I don't know, actually. Yeah, there's no Arabic in the, I mean, we had Greek terms, but I don't think that we had anything to work with. I don't know.
A lot of the text that work has focused on so far from the pre-Arabic period, but of course in Chrome you can get a lot of comparisons with Arabic in some words. I mean, and also in both directions, of course.
May I add something?
Yes, please.
Yes.
There are, of course, Arabic words in Coptic, some 500 types, according to our knowledge so far. And we actually gathered them systematically in the DDGLC database, but we haven't released the Arabic words part so far. So in a later version of the DDGLC data, the Arabic loanwords in Coptic will be included, like 30 verbs and some 400 nouns.
That's amazing. Thanks, Sebastian.
Yeah, thank you.
And then Elisa Sophia is saying, if you need OCR text for your corpus, I'm happy to collaborate. So,
oh, thanks. Yeah, that would be wonderful. Yeah, we can talk about that after. Yes.
Excellent.
Hmm.
You already answered my question, which is, would you like to make a sense tagged corpus? And
oh yeah, yes I would. Yes I would.
the problem is knowing that I went over this briefly yesterday, but knowing that yod can be father or barley doesn't help you because, unless you know which one it is, the entity typing can help you a little bit to figure out which one it is. If the two senses have distinct entity types, then you can start using our entity classification to say, well, this can't be the plant one because this is a person. But if it's polysemy and two abstract concepts, well, that won't help you then.
Ah. Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually had, you reminded me that there was something on one of these slides about entities, but I don't think I actually said it. Yeah, or maybe it was on a slide that I actually removed.
Muhammad
Yeah.
is saying that that he wanted to mention Sebastian Richter about the Arabic words. And then Elisa is asking whether the interlingual matching also took part of speech into account.
Yeah, yes, it did, because it's part of the, yeah, it's there in the, yeah, it's part of the,
Yeah.
of the procedure. Yes, it's, he looks for part of speech congruency. So it is taken account into the ranking. Yes.
Right. Because we had that in both tiers, right? Both the trilingual French, German, English from the Coptic dictionary and the larger Greek, the 7-word net comparison.
Yeah.
She's saying because she was thinking of adjectives in Coptic hardly existing. Of course, you need to be allowed to match adjectives to nouns, because otherwise Coptic doesn't really distinguish adjectives from nouns except for the small class of historical adjectives.
Yes, I mean, I think we've done very little evaluation, and we really need this sense type corpus. So I mean, I consider this the first iteration of it.
Yeah. All right, thank you, Laura. At this point, we're going to take a
Thanks.
10-minute break. So it looks like we'll resume 5 minutes late, but that's okay. So let's resume at 15 past, and everybody get a snack, refresh yourselves, and come back for the next talk in 10 minutes. Thank you. Again, who's chairing the next session? So is it you or is it Lance, or what did you guys make out?
What do you think? Should I do that or?
Feel free if you like, or
Okay, then may I, or you want to do that, or?
well, I just did the first one, so you guys choose.
Okay, Lance, what do you think?
It makes no difference to me.
Okay, then may I do that, or?
Yeah, please.
Okay, thank you. Okay, welcome to the second session today. The first talk, is by Katrin John, Dylan Burns, and Antonio Sebastian Richter. Their title is From Database to Dictionary, Current Development at DDGLC. The floor is yours, please.
Thank you very much. So I share my screen. So can you see the presentation? Wonderful. So the presentation will be guided through by me, but also as co-authors, so to speak, in spirit and in presence are Dylan Burns and Antonio Sebastian Richter, who will also be there for the Q&A afterwards. And when I say guiding you through, I think I should correct myself already in saying I probably will run you through, and as long as I'm not running you over with it, I think we can do that, right? So there are basically three headwords I want to give you for what I want to show you. The first is to set the frame. This is for people who don't know what DDGLC is doing, just a very short introduction what we are doing. The bigger part is database, and I hope you get annoyed enough that there are several different spellings of the word database. That would be nice. And the third part is also just a short one, which points in our perspective, our future endeavors, so to speak. So the database and dictionary of Greek loanwords in Coptic project, short DDGLC, has originally been hosted by the Egyptological Institute Georg Steindorf of the University of Leipzig since April 2010, when it began its pilot phase, back then funded by the Saxonian State Ministry of Sciences and Art. But since November 2012, it is funded by the Deutsche Forschungsgemeinschaft as a long-term project with a projected lifespan ranging through 2024. The project seeks to produce a systematic, comprehensive, and detailed lexicographical compilation and description of Greek loanwords as attested in the entire Coptic corpus throughout all dialects and genres of text. The results of the project shall be made available in an online database and in a printed dictionary. The phases that we are going through are as follows. You already heard about the pilot phase from 10 till 12, followed by a phase that we had in Leipzig, the first phase until 2015. Since then, we are at the university, at a Freie University in Berlin, currently in our third phase. And third in this instance means in the part of the project that we are mainly focused on entering a lot amount of attestations on digital slips, if you will. And this will be followed next year by a dictionary phase where we go the step further in compiling out of this data a dictionary for print and also for online publication. So currently our project members are under the project coordinator, Tony Sebastian Richter, is the Dylan Burns, Frederick Kruger, Zina Becker, Anne Krons, Nina Speransky, and I'm for the IT part of it, and our student researchers, Yannick Petersdorf and Philipp Schaffenberger. There is, of course, a bit more information on our project and the complete list of our staff, also interns that help to compile a huge amount of data that we have, and you can access that on our webpage here on the slide. So now I come to a little bit of a gameplay, or it's more like a mind game than a word game of database. So if you look up database in dictionary.com, you have actually three spellings. The main one is database without a space. But since our aspect is and maybe maybe you allow me to use a German word. If you see database as Datenbasis, so basically a huge amount of text and data that we have, that is actually the perspective where we see us. Not so much of a fancy tool in the realm of digital humanities, but actually really the comprehensive collection of related data that we accumulated for Greek loanwords in Coptic. That's why this aspect of database with the space is actually a nice, so to speak, typo. But of course, we have our data stored in a database, in this case, a relational database that we are actually having since 2010. The scheme of the database looks like this. We group it, so to speak, in modules. They don't work on their own, but it's easier to subsume them in a category to know where we are. There's on the right side of the picture is the so-called metadata module that has the manuscript text information, manuscript and text with assigning value tables. And then the lexicographical module on the left side of the page that has the Greek lemma, the Coptic usage, and the main table for our slides. This is the attestations. But we also have the Arabic lemma list, which already Sebastian Richter spoke about. We also have that in with 500 lemma entries currently. I would try to give you a slightly closer overview of what kind of data we have, because it would be interesting to know what aspect of the data might be of interest to you. So this is from the metadata module, the table for manuscripts. We have, of course, a name, a siglum, or other names that it might be known by, and a comment to make any kind of reference or information you want to add. And we have the information about the collection where this manuscript comes from. This is data or a list taken over from Trismegistos. Then we have a section for dating information that can be either entered in with a verbal string, but also then counted or calculated into an actual number. And also the source of the date is given plus the page number where it is. If known, or then we give the information of provenance and also what the artifact is, format, codex, material, papyrus in this case, if it is part of an ancient library. And again, a general comment is possible here. We also link to known databases like Trismegistos and PAFS. And here at the bottom of the page, you see all the combinations out of manuscripts and texts that are related to this entry in this case. Then the text page is, besides the physical part of what we have, the text, so more as a work in terms of paths, where we have the name, text siglum, and what the siglum is coming from. We have the link to paths to the works section there, and also the related combinations out of manuscript and texts. What we are rather happy about is our text typology. In those 6 categories, we mark where it belongs to, which allows us to filter loanwords according to their either broad text typology or maybe about content. So this is a good tool to substructure or subgroup attestations. Both the information from text and manuscript are combined together in the manuscript text page, which then adds the dialect information, because that can vary among the different texts on one manuscript. Also, the source for the dialect is given, and the edition that we are using therefore. And that's the part that concludes the metadata module. From the manuscript text table, we link then to the lexicographical module, but coming now from the other side, on the top level is the Greek lemma, which we have with the lemma string, part of speech, and the meaning, which is the basic, most of the times, the first meaning in LSJ. We have, if applicable, mark when it is actually also a loanword already in Greek, for example, from Hebrew or other languages. Then we have 2 types of sources or references for the lemma. One is Förster, And I should explain that at the beginning, we started with a lemma list coming from indices and from Förster, so that we wouldn't start with an empty Greek lemma list, but rather have a beginning to start with. So we entered those already available to us and filled them up bit by bit, so to speak. And Förster was the main one of those. As soon as we have attestations in our database, then we add references to dictionaries, in this case, LSJ and Sophocles. And we already heard yesterday in one talk about the tagging of semantic fields, which we have here in our Greek lemma as well. We also use the loanword typology tags available. You can apply up to 3, but also Donseif Sachgruppen, also up to 3 entries are possible there. The next level currently beneath the Greek lemma, which has quite a history behind its back, is the Coptic usage. It contains hierarchization, which you will probably hopefully understand in a second. Then the part of speech, if what we have here is either appearing in a construction in a phrase or actually is a compound. Then a label where we can decide if it's a general term or it appears mainly in theological works. Then our lexicographical definition and other defining fields for our Coptic usage, which is basically a sense, but can be more than that. So the main view for lexicographers to get closer to what actually resembles a dictionary in our database is this page, just the Coptic lemma and Coptic review page. And there you see that the hierarchy is actually coordinating all the usages according to its lemma, its Coptic lemma. And a very interesting field for lexicographers is where you see how detailed it can get. The usage description, where we have a lot of syntactic information to put attestations in a very detailed level in a container, so to speak, that works throughout all the lexicographers who don't know necessarily what this particular meaning might be about, but all the information given here helps to decide which is the right box to put it in. So the main layout that the lexicographers see on a day-to-day basis is the attestation page, where we have the metadata shown on the top, and then the quotation from the Coptic, and it's up to the lexicographer to decide how much of the context they think necessary to understand the loanword. It is tagged completely as it is, and also there's a translation, and also the translation there is tagged. Then, because of the tagging, it is copied into the orthography field, which adds closing or opening parentheses if necessary. Other than that, it keeps at that level the spelling as it is. Then there is the encoding field, which for some researchers is, so to speak, a gold mine that defines the loanword, seeing it from its core going up to object it is combined with. And lexicographers know those codes by heart. Maybe sometimes they won't, but there is the encoding list on the right side, so they can look up the codes that are necessary. So you see that they have to type in a lot of information or take over. And sometimes, especially if you have a word like there, it doesn't add anything new in accordance with what a new sense might bring. So we adopted a procedure that we call fast track, FT, where we only type in the quote and tag it and assign it to the right lemma, but to a fast track usage. So it doesn't add any new information to a new usage, but it counts as an attestation for that usage and that lemma in question. And also the encoding field doesn't have to be filled out, which makes it much quicker, and we gain a lot of tokens. And this is actually quite a nice procedure. This is now a single attestation based. Lexicographers also can choose to have it in a list view that you can utilitize very nicely for searches to show the same word among other texts in the fast track view. So to give you a few numbers, how big our data is. So currently, yesterday, we had 174,552 attestations. The majority of that is related to Greek lemmata and about 1,700 with Arabic lemmata. We have 5,170 Greek lemmata. A smaller amount of them have no Coptic usages yet, but lexicographers are now entering those with a higher priority to really attest all of our Greek lemmata. Then we have 16,214 Coptic usages with Greek lemmata related and 322 Coptic usages to Arabic lemmata related. 500 Arabic lemmata and half of them don't have a Coptic usage yet. What might be interesting is attestations. So we have in Sahidic, because we also have the dialect in it, 141,000 in Sahidic. The next one you see here, Bohairic, Achmimic. So it's actually a good distribution, I would say. So if you see a part of speech according to attestations, you see that the majority is nouns with 78,277, followed by functional language in first and second position, then verbs, adverbs, prepositions, interjections. What we call omitted here is what happens with fast track. So because this kind of statistic is based on what is filled out in the encoding field, this is now about a quarter of our attestations don't have the encoding. That's why they are called omitted here. So you see the cake chart on the right side. And if you take out that snippet, it changes the distribution of part of speech quite a bit. So you see nouns now with 61%, but that should not mislead you because it's actually the functional words that are in a majority in fast track and not nouns. So you could apply that and think the same distribution would fit in this part of the cake here, which is actually not the case. So since we are a data base, so to speak, we also feel ourselves as a data provider, and we have done so with the Coptic Scriptorium. And I was thankful, Amir, for the blog post because I had forgotten when it was. So it was in 2016. We also handed out our material to the Coptic WordNet, but I also received an email from stating that comprehensive Coptic lexicon also seemed to be a rich source to use for the work in the Coptic WordNet. But I don't know if you actually ended up using it for that. But who is interested in it, here are the two links to it. And I'm very sure that Maxime, who follows up with that, will, of course, show you that in more detail. So this is now a more centralized place to publish a part of our data to make accessible no matter the interest of the data. But if somebody has special interests, they can always contact us and we can see what we can provide. So I found a very interesting, I think it's a bug, but who knows? When I looked in the statistics of the downloads for the CCL version 1, a few days ago, it was 266 for the DDGLC part of the data. And for the BBFA part, it was 285. And now it jumped to 3,000, which doesn't seem right, but it's interesting to see that you can make a screenshot of that and think people are that interested in this part of our data. But I think it's actually a mistake. Maybe a script did that because the actual views for the page where you download is just 1,159, but it was kind of surprising. So this CCL is of course published in the CDO. Our data, I picked here a very simple entry where you see our forms, and we have to be careful here. They are not forms in a traditional way, so they are not normalized, but they are attested in our corpus and checked orthographies. Also, sometimes arrows are taken in there as forms and spellings, but they are not a head word, so to speak. And please keep in mind, note that is down here, it's not a finished publication, so a lot of spellings would change, come into the corpus or will be removed from it. And here you see our usages. And I looked it up. It's about 60% of our census, of our usages are in the CDO, and 40% are still just in our database, but those are difficult cases and multi-word expressions who makes it a bit difficult to map it to what might be useful. But they will be available in our database. So coming back to that dictionary phase, you see that the time is kind of closing in on that. And so what we are currently doing is preparing to go into this different type of work. That means going from attestations to form now fully fledged dictionary entries to be printed. And what we are currently doing is a complete, not a complete, but a very broad overhaul on the lexicographical side about some fields and how they relate to others and how that should be represented in the dictionary, and adjusting both our policies but also our database to what we need to have for our dictionary phase. And it will contain a lot of also manual work to adjust some of the information in our database. So what we are striving to release either this year or next year is what we call a vertical release. That means with a selection of entries, we want to test how the data can be represented in the dictionary and on the online publication then, and let people see and poke around in it and hopefully give us feedback about those kinds of decisions, so that we can, work with the user's perspective on what they would use later then. So we all thank you very much for listening. I hope it was not too much running over, and thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Catherine, Dylan, and Sebastian. Thank you. This is a splendid work of lexicography. That is super impressive that you record the data from very various dialects and subdialects. It is wonderful that you also record valency patterns of each usage of Greek verbs. I remember in the early stage, Greek verbs require R, like in synhista, but later Greek verbs were used without R, only synhista, as Eitan Grossman wrote in his article. Do you also mark the existence of R in each data before the Greek verbs?
Should I answer, or somebody if you want?
Well, everybody knows that. Of course, we do that. This is part of our quite sophisticated grammatical description of loanword usages of different parts of speech in their different, syntactic environs. And this, of course, includes the existence or non-existence of the light verb for verbs.
Yeah, I remember also you also record the, er agaton and t agaton, and so on. Also the right verb before noun, but also you record the right verbs before verbs too. Okay, that's totally great. And Amia Zeldes, Amia's question is it possible to get something like a list of all loan verbs which are sometimes transitive and all loan verbs which are never transitive? This would be very useful for parsing when we need to disambiguate an object marker or adjunct.
Mm-hmm. Well, certainly
I think
it
we
would
could
be.
do this.
Yeah, I think we can do this. And Nina Speransky worked through our lemmata of verbal lexemes, and she is one currently who knows best about what is in it and what not. I don't know if Nina is here. I can't see that, but yes, we are. There is precise, of course, description of valency patterns in the data, and this question of transitivity can systematically be addressed. Is Nina here? I don't know.
Not in the members here. Maybe
okay.
on YouTube.
Maybe Nina is not here.
Should I answer the question by some words were usages and others not usages? So we have usages when it is attested. So we find a spot where it appears, but since we already started with an existing Greek lemma, they are not yet there. So that's why they don't have a usage, but they will have one as soon as we find the word in a text.
Yeah, without usage means hitherto unattested. Also, we know that a word does exist in Coptic, but we haven't come across it so far.
We have a policy now of seeking out these words, of targeting them and finding the attestations. So seeking them and befriending them and providing them attestations as much as possible. This is also important for the fast track feature, where we're not simply inputting data without analyzing any of it. Rather, the point of the fast track feature is to skip over data where we don't think the analysis will bring much new to the database. But when entering a manuscript or text, and then on fast track, and then we discover a particular word or usage of a word that does enhance our data significantly, we give it the full analysis always.
Amir?
I just wanted to add that if you're trying to get attestations for certain rare words and you need help with bulk searches and scriptorium data, you can just contact me. We can do large scale queries for looking for
Sure,
certain
yeah.
formats.
Thanks for this offer. Thanks.
Okay, so it is it is the same as your comment, right? By the way, 1,000 views for the XML data may be surprising, but CDO gets many thousands of sessions each month according to Google Analytics, and it includes the loanword data. Okay. And also there's a question from Gyun-Hook Lee. One question I have, how can I get access on the reference of each usage?
I'm afraid I don't understand the question. So, are you coming from the CDO where do you see the reference to the usage with the ID? But since our data is not online in our own database, you can't reference it there. But if you have the usage or interest in our data, you can always contact us and we can send you something. Or you can use the CCL version if you want to look up that data. But that's as deep as we go with the CCL, the usage level.
We do accept requests for data specific locations of attestations. The usages that are given on the CDO are, of course, based off of the data in our database. And that data, as you may have noticed, has extensive reference information on the attestation page. So we can tell you not only the name of the manuscript, but the page number and line number where you will find it for anything.
And from Miriam Wissa, greetings Sebastian and Splendid as usual. Is there any digitized lexicon, hieratic or demotic or Coptic?
If Miriam means an integrated lexicon of the different language phases, such thing is actually, of course, under construction in the TLA and the Thesaurus Lingua Aegyptiae project. So there is actually one of the goals, an integrated lexicon of the different language phases from hieroglyphic through demotic until Coptic. But this is still underway. So.
Okay. Also, I remember you also have the Arabic Lemata button on the top left corner of the screen. You also wrote that one more thing. Sebastian Richter wrote Coptic 1 in Arabic. We, GGCLC, in collaboration with Girgis Boshra, started working on a list of Arabic equivalents to the Greek loanwords in Coptic. Could you explain about it more?
Well, this is, of course, two different things. We have the Arabic lemmata in terms of Arabic words borrowed into Coptic. And another thing is that we started producing a systematic list of Arabic equivalents to the Greek loanwords in Coptic, so as to provide Arabic-speaking users of the dictionary, of our dictionary, with specific Arabic equivalents. And I thought this might also be interesting for the WordNet business, because this provides a full list of equivalents of Arabic words to our Greek loanwords.
Okay, thank you. And finally, there's a very important question. If the data will be available online, when? From Fadi Rafat.
As Katrin explained, we are just working on a vertical release. This is to say, on a release of examples of different parts of speech. So this is just examples, specimen lemmata, but our budgeting is running out in 2024. So we should provide a fuller publication by then.
Okay, so yeah, you answered all the questions. Thank you so much, Catherine, Dylan, and Sebastian.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And our next speaker is Maxim Kupreyev, and his presentation is Comprehensive Coptic Lexicon version 1.2, new features and an ongoing work. Okay, Maxim, please, the floor is yours.
Is the quality okay of the sound? Do you hear me?
Yeah.
Right, okay, so I will share my screen. Does everyone see? Oh, it's slide 8. Okay, we don't want to start from slide 8 now. Okay, so does everyone see my slides? Okay, good. So thank you, Amir and So, for organizing this event, and thank you for inviting me. I will talk about the new version of the Comprehensive Coptic Lexicon, and I will start by saying a couple of words about the previous version, which was released in May 2019. I'll give a brief review of what happened. So the Comprehensive Coptic Lexicon is a joint release of DGLC dataset, which Catherine was talking about. It's kind of in German abgespeckte Version. It's kind of a shortened version of the data, which, for example, does not include these light verb constructions and so on. So probably 60% of their usages, as Catherine said. And the release also included the Egyptian Coptic part, which was produced by Thesaurus Lingua Aegyptia here. It's basically based on Cram Dictionary, on the Sahidic entries in Cram Dictionary, encoded as TI XML. The project was started by Frank Feder 5 years ago. Frank had a talk yesterday. I don't know if he's here today. Because of the manual, manpower constraints, we managed to put in only Sahidic entries. So dialects are missing, but we did extend the Cram Dictionary entries with French and German translations. DGLC exported their database into the TLA data model, and that's what Comprehensive Coptic Lexicon version 1 is. We decided to take two publication strategies because right now, not only process data are interested, but also there are more and more digital humanists who like to browse the data themselves. So we decided to publish the raw data, also including the XML scheme and release notes. We published it in the Refubium data repository. This is the repository of the Free University of Berlin.
Maxim, you have an issue where the bottom of your screen is green. So
yes.
The bottom of the screen. Sorry, like this. Okay.
Yeah.
That's better. Yes.
Right.
All right. So, yeah, it's full screen. Yeah. Okay. So the raw data was published, and the process data is what is known as CopticDictionary.org. So the data set behind the Coptic dictionary is basically a comprehensive Coptic lexicon. Thanks to Amir, Kerry, and the Coptic Scriptorium team who did the web interface, you can use this wonderful tool. I would like to stress out that Egyptian Coptic lexicon is conceptualized as a part of the integrated ancient Egyptian dictionary, which would include Old, Middle, Late Egyptian, Demotic, and Coptic. So something which is started actually as an integrative part of TLA developed into a standalone kind of spin-off, which proved to be pretty productive and inspiring. As you see, as Katrin mentioned here, I give you some of the statistics. The downloads of raw data, for example, yes, the popularity of Greek loanwords in Coptic are difficult. Are amazing. So, but like people, according to the current statistic, they were downloaded more than 10 times than the rest. Than the Coptic Egyptian, for example. Concerning, I get a message, please move this window away from the shared application. Is it for me or? Okay. I don't know. Is it the quality is okay, so I don't have to change anything, no? Amir, do you hear me?
We can hear you and we can see that weird warning, but
okay, yeah. Because please move. Yeah, it's a strange warning. Okay. Also, that's the statistics for the raw data. For the process data, you might know that the CopticDictionary.org got the Digital Humanities Award 2019 in the category Best DH Tool or Suite of Tools. So that's a brief review of what's happened, what's kind of occurred with the previous release. So this message is kind of interesting now. Okay, what is in version 1.2? I will summarize the major new features of this release. It includes two projects completed. It includes the optimized data structure, also 41 resolved issues, also the cleaned up digital C data set where the semantic information was clarified. Also, we have the new features on the side of Coptic Dictionary Online, and as the last point, I will outline the perspectives. What will come after this release? Yes. The two projects, I call them projects because they included a kind of theoretical research. The first project was to remove round brackets from orthographic variants. A kind of simple task turned into really challenging. I will share the I will share the project specification. I publish the project specification on GitHub. So, well, the parentheses were causing problems in such queries. Parentheses or these round brackets. This is what I mean, for example, case like this. Parentheses had also different semantics. They were marking orthographic variants. They were marking collocated prepositions and adverbs, and also a hypothetical status absolutus of words attested in bound forms only. So our goal was to disambiguate all these cases and have a clear semantics for parentheses. There were a number of parameters involved in this task. For example, the position of the brackets, the type of the form, whether it's form type lemma or not non-lemma, the location of the form, the collocated expressions, and so on. So basically the solution was automated. I've done it with Python scripts and then manually cleaned up. One of the requirements was to preserve the obsolete forms, but mark them as deprecated. And the second requirement was to provide pointers from the deprecated to the new forms and vice versa. And the third requirement, which Amir successfully implemented, is not to display the deprecated forms on the Coptic dictionary online. I will not go into the procedure. I'll switch now to the second. So basically, as a result of this disambiguation, we had around 800 new forms which were created by the script. Yes, so this was the first project. The second project was not so so sophisticated, but it was very interesting from the theoretical point of view. It's concerned the encoding of layered forms. And I will again switch to the project description. Layered forms are, or portmanteau forms, these are the forms where one indivisible form corresponds to what normally constitutes two categories: possessive prefix and possessive suffix. You see, for example, the first singular of Coptic possessive articles contains both possessed and possessor information. And the same applies to the second singular femininum. So while in all other cases, you can basically split the grammatical information between the possessed item and the possessor item, you cannot do this in these two cases. So we were thinking about the possible options, and the first option was to have two gram groups.
Maxim, if you meant to switch windows, I think you might be switching windows and we're not seeing it. Did you just share this window rather than your entire screen? Because we keep seeing the browser with the project slide.
I'm now on the encoding of the layered possessive forms.
So that's not showing up. We've just been looking at the project slide. I think you shared only your browser window rather than your entire screen. You either need to share your entire screen or switch to sharing a different window. Zoom can either share a specific window or your entire screen, meaning exactly what you see.
Okay, sorry. So you didn't see. You just see. Okay, sorry. And now?
We can see it now, thanks.
Okay. Okay, yeah, it happens. I guess I have to switch between the, okay, I get it. Okay, sorry for this, because actually I was talking about this, about this project, the encoding of layered possessive forms. Well, these are the cases in question. When the one singular form corresponds to two categories: possessed item and the possessor item. So basically, there are two ways to encode it. There are four possible options to encode it. The first one would be to have two separate gram groups. One gram group for the possessed item, and one gram group for the possessor item. The second option would be to have the kind of universal dependency syntax and encode the possessor information inside of the both types of information inside of the same tag. The third option would be to relegate part of the grammatical information into sense. And the fourth option would be to switch to Lex 0 convention and to create new grammatical tags. Okay, to make it brief, we decided to take the option 3. Basically now this type of grammatical information is encoded in the sense, but in the perspective we would like to switch to Lex 0 convention. Okay, so I guess I have to go back again to the, okay. Is it the slides now again? Okay, good. Apart from these two projects, I made some optimization to the data structure. The first one was to put all orthographical information into one single tag, which is orth, because due to the fact that many people were working on this data, the spellings were contained in both in form directly or in orth. So I put all the spellings uniformly in orth tag. Sahidic forms perceived as default did not have dialect information explicitly encoded. Amir was kind of triggering this on the TDO side, kind of extending this type of information. I decided to do it directly in XML. So now all Sahidic forms have also dialect info, so we don't have to do anything on the TDO side. And I did a first Lex 0 adjustment. It's a it concerns the semantic information. I think now semantic information of the lemmata, as you see on the left and on the right side, is more compact and is more user friendly and readable. All new entries and all new forms were assigned unique IDs. Also, the XML scheme, XML schema, our TLA XML scheme was adopted to support the changes, to support, for example, the status deprecated or the status like edit. There were some other changes to the XML scheme. In total, thanks to feedback we got from the users, we got a lot of issues, and in total 41 issue was resolved, and these issues pertained to all types of information which is included in the XML data set. It included the spelling, there were some empty orthographic values in a number of forms. I stripped white spaces. It was kind of dumb not to do that in the beginning, but now we don't have white spaces. I also corrected the grammatical information with numerals. Many were marked as nouns, some gender information, grammatical info of copula pronouns, and so on. The semantic information of some lemmata was extended. The typos and double entries were corrected. Also, now there is a uniform convention for for single hyphen and for double hyphen. So we use for bound forms, for example, status nominalis and status pronominalis. So for status pronominalis we use double oblique hyphen. There were discrepancies in the use of this. Also, a couple of new entries were created, which were reported by the users, and I would like to thank especially I think it's Mark Lindson, because I know him only through the GitHub repository, and Diliana Atanasova for reporting the problems. Okay, these were the features of the XML dataset. But the comprehensive Coptic lexicon will also include the up-to-date DGLC information, and these information pertains to the census. For example, DGLC changed a couple of usages in their own database, which had an effect on Coptic usages on our side. And for example, there were a number of lemmata which had only one Coptic usage or non-attested Coptic usage, and if these were deleted in the GLC database, this entry was removed also from the current dataset. So we get status deprecated also for a number of entries which come now with the GLC data. The bugs were resolved also. What are the new features on the side of the Coptic dictionary online? One big new thing which Amir implemented is linking Greek words. As Catherine explained, these are the head words of Greek Coptic lexicon. It was linked to Perseus Greek morphology tool.
We're still seeing the new features slide. I think you might be switching windows again. We're only seeing other new features of CCL.
Yes, it's here.
Oh, okay. I thought you were showing a different window. I'm sorry. I thought you were showing the dictionary or something.
No. I'm not showing the dictionary because, well, we've tested this feature already on the test server, and it works. Yes, so you can look up now the Greek words directly in Perseus. Also, this feature includes the DGLC IDs, which was the requirement of the Greek Coptic lexicon database project. We slightly changed the sorting of the displayed forms. Now, like for the usability reasons, and a number of bugs was solved also by Amir on the search interface. Okay, so I'm now coming to the end of the talk, which I would like to outline the perspective of the research and of the project. The version 1.2 will be released this week because it's completed. It has been postponed actually a couple of months because of the corona-induced kind of circumstances, so to say, but everything is ready, including the release notes. So I hope you will all get the email about the release this week. So what are the perspectives of the project? First, we would like to align our data model with the Lex Zero framework. Lex Zero, I provide here a link, is both a technical specification and a set of community-based recommendations for encoding machine-readable dictionaries. It is rooted in the guidelines for the text encoding initiative and delivered as a customization of the TI scheme. Why we do this? Because it basically brings us to a wider framework, to a bigger framework which is used by other dictionaries, and also because LexZero is cooperating with other publishing tools, such as, for example, TI Publisher, which automatically outputs HTML database or even PDFs of the TI XML dataset. So it opens the doors into the cooperation of other projects, and it's a kind of overarching framework. That's why we'd like, the changes will not be dramatic, but still, for example, encoding grammatical information will change. The second field of perspective research is certainly the integration of other dialects. This is what is missed, I guess, most by the users. I get regularly the inquiries about the Bohairic, and many people are also willing to participate. We have to understand how can we coordinate all these wishes. But basically, our roadmap currently is to integrate the lexicon and text corpus of Wolf-Peter Funk, which contains 13 sections on dialects. These will be matched, each single dialect will be matched with the metadata of the Coptic, comprehensive Coptic lexicon by comparing both form and the meaning. I did some research with the Bohairic already, so possibly I can show how it works with Bohairic in a couple of months. So, and the third venue, the third path of research would be the import of other resources. For example, yesterday during the talk of Paolo Buzzi, I had an idea of integrating the places section of paths, which contains 419 records of place names. This would be a valuable contribution because Chrome doesn't have them. So we could integrate the place names which have Coptic tag, Coptic translation, Coptic names in them. I guess that's it for the release, and wait for the email which will come this week with the new version of Comprehensive Coptic Lexicon 1.2. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Maxim. It is great to know the great progress in your releases and management of comprehensive Coptic lexicon and also Coptic dictionary online. This can be an ideal model of linked open data to parcels, to DGGLC, to paths, etc. Or maybe to Coptic WordNet. I have a question. You wrote you wrote that you added personal suffixes like F for third person masculine. Do you also add second person feminine singular as zero morph to the lexicon, or it's a rarum or rarissimum, very rare in the cross linguistically? I'm very curious about.
No, there are no zero morphs. They will kind of be hidden in this what we call layered forms. No, there are no zeros.
So you didn't put the second person feminine singular morph.
Yeah. That was the problem with the second project. That was the task of this second project, which I mentioned, where I had difficulties with sharing the slide, the screen. The layered forms contain two types of grammatical information. So, and it's important to make them findable. So basically, our our task is to encode it in the way that also the zero forms are findable. And that's why I think we will go into this leg zero convention.
Cool. Leg zero convention of TI, right? Okay. And there are several comments on chat. Yeah, there are several comments from Amir Zedes. Amir, could you explain them or?
Sure, I just wanted to say about, so I said two things. One about option 3 for the possessors is that another advantage is that it's the same standard as unimorph, which is the standard used in universal dependencies in most computational linguistics and NLP projects. So it's maybe worth checking out, and it matches exactly what you've done with the possessor and possessed. It's convenient because you can treat a portmanteau form like the feminine form as having a possessor gender and a possessed gender, and that's it. You don't ask how it happened, you just say, this word indicates a masculine possessed and a feminine possessor of second person, and then you don't mess with it anymore. And they have standards for possessor and possessed, a number, gender, and everything else. So it's convenient. I was glad to see you do this, and I'm hoping you'll stay with it because I like it. And the other things, I'd be interested to see how we can add entity data into CDO. So we have now quantitative information about each word that is attested as an entity, how often it's used to describe a person or a physical object or an abstract. And we also have these entity graphs that I showed yesterday with, how do you usually form a phrase headed by ma? And then you see that it's, u-ma-in or p-ma-et, and you can kind of follow those statistics. This might be fun to display in the CDO, and it wouldn't be too difficult. So if you're interested in that, we can talk more about it in the discussion.
Right. No, it's a good idea. It's you mentioned that it's actually corpus dependent. So I thought you would do it rather in direction of the corpus, but
so the corpus is very instance based, right? What's good about the dictionary is that it's aggregation based. Tell me about this word as opposed to show me a bunch of occurrences.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Oh, as for possessive article, I remember Chris Heinteges wrote in his grammar that he separated pe and k in pek and so on. How about this analysis?
Separating or not separating?
So he separated pek into pe and k, and pe is a kind of possessive host and k is
that's what we do, but for example, that's not what Anis Coptic scriptorium does. You see it as an entity, as a one. I mean, it makes sense because in German, diese or the dieser, it's also not dies und er or the dies and er. So it's one demonstrative, for example. So like many deictics have this compound information. Dieser in German also contains two types of information, of the possessor and the possessed. So we established this convention to separating basically dies and er, but the Anis and Coptic scriptorium see it as a one entity. So
yeah, I mean, there are several motivations for not separating them, which is of course just a convenience. All of this is a convention. These are a closed list of items, so you can analyze them however you like. There's never going to be a new one. We know all of them. And the reasons for not analyzing it are that you have forms with zero morph, which complicate your life a lot if you try to separate. So not only the feminine, also pa. Pa is not pe plus zero. It's not pe plus backspace key and a. It's weird, right? So you don't want to deal with that. And additionally, for disambiguating, it's difficult because if you separate pic, it will look like pe plus k, which could be a copula followed by the second person. So basically, it's kind of asking for trouble. There's a lot of reasons not to do it, and few reasons yes to do it, because once you can find them, it's trivial to say, oh, if you wanted to count all of them as. So we just treat them as paradigmatic. There's a paradigm of article-like things, and this also helps the part of speech tagging and parsing because it's article, noun, and noun. And so all these article-like things fall into one paradigm. These are the main reasons why we decided not to separate.
I guess you're wiser after you start doing this stuff, because originally we were guided by Cram, and people were just encoding the way Cram did it. So yeah.
I think we mainly followed Leighton in most of our decisions. So I think after describing the articles and the rest of Leighton's grammar, he just says pec dash.
Yeah, there's also a question about that from Elise Sofia Linke. For the integration of TLA and CCL, it may be necessary to split back. You already answered it, or so that one can track what happened to the suffix pronouns.
I mean, currently they are split. That's the point. That's currently we do split, and yeah, one of the reasons was that TLA also splits them. I mean, TLA has the suffix. So
a lot of dictionaries have C references, and I don't think it's problematic to have an entry called PEC, which says C, P, and K. And then you have parity between all the data models because you just redirect. If somebody searches for PEC, you tell them, oh, you mean P and K.
Okay, and there was also a comment from Elise Sofia Linke. The link to the Perseus morphology tool is great. I use that tool all the time. This will help a lot. Can you integrate that to Coptic scriptorial Anis too, or have you already? Yeah, Amir already answered it on comment, but could you explain it more?
yeah, it's I mean, Anis, it's realized on the TDO side. It's realized on the lexicon. So it's working already in the test version, and I think this week we will upload the final like alpha version of the data set to the test. Then everyone will take a look of the like involved parties, and then we can release the data and you can use it.
Great. Okay, so yeah, you answered all the questions, I think. Okay, thank you so much, Maxime.
Welcome.
Thank you. Okay, so the next speaker is Koshi Dosu. His talk is the Coptic Magical Papyri and the Kyprianos database. Hi, Koshi. You're a co-host now?
Great, thank you. Okay.
Okay, great. Yeah, the floor is yours, please.
Okay, thank you, Siso and Demir, for the invite. So I will follow Elisa's lead and turn off my video during the presentation to avoid distraction. I will basically just be giving you an overview of our project and what we have planned. It's a little bit less, it's a bit smaller than some of the projects which have been presented so far, but hopefully you'll nonetheless find it interesting. So the Coptic Magical Papyri, vernacular religion in late Roman and early Islamic Egypt, is a 5-year project based at the University of Würzburg. It was funded as part of the Excellent Ideas project. And the key team members are 3 people, myself, Edward Love, and Marketa Preiniger-Svobodova. We were recently lucky enough to get a small amount of funding. So one problem that we've had is that although our positions are fully funded for 5 years, it's only recently that we've had any funding to get assistance with IT or any other members to help us with data entry. So far we've had to be quite resourceful in terms of developing digital resources. Yes, so we have currently an IT person who started in March, Matusz Preiniger, and also a research assistant, Stella Turker, who started helping us with data checking as of May. And then we have a few additional contributors who are helping with, or who helped us with data entry in the past, and who are currently checking the contents of the database. And we have a website, which I encourage you to visit if you want to learn more about the project, which I'll be showing you later on. So our project goals, we have several of them, and they can really be divided into 2 sides. The first side is, of course, research, but all of the 3 members of the team felt that public communication was quite important. So on the research side, the first task which we've had, which was completed earlier last year, was the compilation of a checklist of Coptic magical texts. This was then followed by the compilation of data on the manuscript, so the kind of basic information which is already in Trismegistos, plus a lot more material information about the manuscript which we're working on. And we're currently on the stage of producing editions. So we're producing new editions of all of the Coptic magical texts. So either new editions of previously published texts or entirely new editions of text which have not yet been published. And then throughout this period, we've been producing studies. Unfortunately, due to the long publication time in our field, none of these have appeared, but I think there should be several outcomes from the project appearing in the second half of this year. On the other side, we've been blogging fairly regularly. So in the first year of our project, we had a new blog post every week. We're down to about one every 2 weeks just now. We also started a podcast a few months ago, and if you're interested, there's some fantastic interviews with Sebastian Richter, Jacques van der Vliet, and Dylan Burns about their work and how it intersects with Coptic magic. Then we have a Facebook page which allows the public to communicate with us. So the Kyprianos database really kind of falls in the middle of these two sides of our work, in the sense that it is a research tool for us. So it's originally generated in order to allow us to keep track of our data and to consult it more efficiently. But we also hope in the very near future to make it publicly available, both for scholars and for the general public. So Coptic magic, and this was Sebastian Richter who observed this when he visited us in Würzburg earlier this year, is quite an interesting group of texts within the larger field of Coptology. It's a very well-known category, so a lot of people who are not interested in Coptic or Coptic papyrology for any other reason are often interested in and know about Coptic magical texts. But on the other hand, Coptic magic is perhaps poorly studied. So there are some editions out there, but they are often insufficient. The best known collection is the Meyer and Smith Ancient Christian Magic. And of course, it's fantastic in allowing us to access many of these texts in translation, but it's really insufficient in not providing the Coptic text and containing many errors, essentially. So for those, I mean, I'm sure everybody has encountered a Coptic magical text at some point, but just to give you an idea of what they look like in terms of formal and functional characteristics, they often contain certain linguistic forms. So there's certain invocations of divine beings, such as I invoke you, I adjure you, and these tend to be very stereotyped. Often at the ends of texts, we find phrases such as quickly, quickly, so take, take, and so on. There's also magical names, so vocus magicae, such as Abrasax or Ablamethanaba. And we also have characteras, which are these symbols, also known as ring signs, and also, of course, images, figurae magicae. So I suppose from a practical point of view, when somebody in an excavation encounters a text like this, they classify it as magical and then ask a specialist of Coptic magic or ancient magic to help them translate it. From a functional perspective, these texts are usually concerned with protection or healing, cursing, love or favor spells, and divination. Of course, this is quite a fluid category. We are really aiming to include in our database, we have included really all texts in the past have been described as magical. And so this includes many materials whose relationship to the larger category of magic is more questionable. So for example, there's a large number of texts which contain parts of the Bible, and particularly the incipits of the Gospels and citations from the Psalms. These are often not directly of the same type as these magical texts, which you see, an example which you see on the screen here, but nonetheless, we've generally included them because they've often been classified as magical in the past. And to give you an idea of the kind of temporal range of our texts, they really span the entire range of production of Coptic. Our earliest texts in Coptic are from the magical texts in Coptic are from the 3rd century. These are the old Coptic texts, of course, and the latest ones date from around the 12th century, insofar as they can be dated. Although, of course, Coptic magical texts, like all other papyrological genres, pose considerable problems for dating. And we hope to resolve some of those problems in the course of our project, but we're not there yet. So, of course, there's lots of previous work being done, which you might be familiar with. And the key works which our projects build upon is, of course, Kopf's Ausgewählte Koptische Zaubertexte. This is a 3-volume work of texts, translations, and a 3rd volume of studies, which appeared in the beginning of the 1930s and was the outcome of Kopf's doctoral work on some of the Schmidt papyri. From the late 1980s until the early 2000s, Marvin Meyer led a project in Coptic magical texts, the most well-known outcome of which was this volume, Ancient Christian Magic, but which produced several other important outputs, so several other editions of Coptic magical texts and conference proceedings. More recently, of course, there's been TM Magic. So this has been primarily the work of Francisca Neta, but also Marc de Pauw. This has been a great resource for us, of course, but the information which it contains is not quite rich enough for our requirements as a project. And then more recently, Roxane Bélanger-Sarrazin, who recently defended her thesis, produced in 2017, a catalogue of published Coptic magical texts. So this is the work that we're really building upon. So Kyprionis, which is our database, our current focus is on Coptic magical texts, but ultimately we'd like it to include a much larger range of texts because it's essentially a working database. So it's a tool for us to use as we study these texts and as we produce editions of them and studies of them. It's important to us that it also allows us to access relevant comparative material. So this includes the Greco-Egyptian magical texts, so the PGM and the PGM, the Greek and Demotic magical texts. In the long term, of course, curse tablets and amulets from elsewhere in the Roman world. So these are primarily written in Latin and Greek, but also in other regional languages, the Celtic languages, Oscan and so on. Christian liturgical texts, of course, are very important. Obviously, talking about papyrological material here, which is more directly comparable. Medical, alchemical, and astrological texts. These are often very closely related, both in terms of their content, but also in their find spots. They often occur in the same locations and archives as Coptic magical texts. And then perhaps going a little bit further afield, but not too far, we're interested in other traditions of Christian magic, so Armenian, Syriac, Ethiopian, often some very interesting parallels there. With later Egyptian magical practices, so Hebrew and Arabic in particular, there's a lot of interesting material in the Cairo Geniza, including Christian material in Arabic, and then going further back in time, of course, there's Pharaonic magical texts. And perhaps even thinking even further afield, perhaps Mesopotamian texts, but that's perhaps a little bit of a pipe dream for now. So in terms of what our database currently contains, I think all databases have a slightly different approach to organizing their contents. We think of our material primarily in terms of manuscripts, which corresponds, I think, to texts in Trismegistos, to codicological units in paths, and I think to manuscripts in the DDGLC. So our database is relatively small. It contains 1,545 manuscripts at the moment, of which 543 are our core of Coptic magical manuscripts. Interestingly, actually, the majority of manuscripts in our database are currently Greek, because obviously a large number of Greek liturgical and magical texts which are in our database, followed by Coptic, and then we have a much smaller number of texts in Demotic, Arabic, Latin, and other forms of Egyptian. The majority of our texts are magical, but you can have several liturgical texts, medical texts, alchemical, and astrological. So in terms of thinking about how this relates to coverage, we are fairly confident we have a very large percentage of the Coptic magical text, pretty much all of the published Coptic magical texts, and probably a large proportion of the unpublished material out there. We believe that we have all of the published Greek and Demotic texts from within Egypt, all of the medical Coptic texts from Egypt, and all of the alchemical papyrological material from Egypt. But the other categories are a lot spottier. And of course, this means this intended coverage means that we have a lot of overlap with other databases, such as the Campbell-Bonner database, which contains amulets, usually in form of gems, the Tadema database, which is unfortunately not accessible at the moment, which contains primarily curses from around the Roman world, the TLA, which is currently working on older Egyptian magical texts, and the Chicago Transmission of Magical Knowledge Project, which is currently working on reeditions of the Greek and Demotic magical material, and we've been able to incorporate some of their data. So they are improved datings of Greek and Demotic texts. And I should also mention here, of course, the DDGLC project, who are kind enough to provide us with some of their transcriptions that they've already produced of Coptic magical manuscripts. In terms of the structure, so again, our focus at the moment is on manuscripts. So we've essentially completed gathering data on Coptic magical manuscripts. We're currently working on the texts. So each manuscript may have one or more texts. Typically a Coptic magical amulet, we'll consider it to have one text, which is the text of the amulet. If it's a handbook, which contains recipes for multiple rituals, we'll consider it to have as many texts as it does recipes. On a higher level, manuscripts are assigned to archives. Archives, as we use it here, is not strictly a papyrological archive. It's really a larger assemblage of whatever type. So this could be a shared find spot in a monastery. It could be a dossier which can be reconstructed from hands. And of course, manuscripts can then be associated with toponyms. Texts can be associated with identifiable hands. We have some hands which produce more than one text, or some texts which are written more than one hand. And then within texts, we also include information on images which occur within them. At the moment, our primary focus, as I said, so our original focus on manuscripts. We've gathered more or less all of the data that we need for the Coptic manuscripts, and we're now moving on to the addition of the Coptic texts, of which there are 979 Coptic magical texts. We've managed to finish transcribing all of these, and about 81% currently have working translations, although these are not necessarily the final translations. So the development, so the FileMaker version was created as soon as our project began. So I should say that before we began, I consulted with several other projects, and in particular, Catherine John from the DDGLC and Troy Griffiths from the Coptic Old Testament project were very helpful in advising me on how to proceed. So we originally created a FileMaker version, and this is the primary version that we still use. As of now, as a few months ago, we began developing what was intended to be an interim solution to allow people to access our data and allow us to receive feedback. So this is essentially a WordPress native database using the tools that are available through WordPress. So there will be some restrictions on, for example, searching, but we hope that this will be online by October 2020. We hope to include in the manuscripts field essentially all of the Coptic magical texts, all of the Greek and Demotic magical texts, and then within the text field to have 20 or so text editions, which can serve as a kind of proof of concept, and then to continually update these. So we're using essentially a Trismegistos model where the data is exported on a weekly basis with updates. For the future, so our project is due to end in September 2023, and as in the case of the Paths database, we really hope this will be a database which remains online after the end of our project. So we're looking into perhaps a custom MySQL, PHP, or even Python solution for the final product. Although our IT person thinks that perhaps WordPress may be possible to do everything we need to in WordPress, which would be perhaps helpful in terms of allowing easy export. So to give you an idea of what the database looks like, this is our manuscripts database in FileMaker. So obviously we provide basic information on sigla. So if there's more than one siglum, we will provide all of the relevant sigla for searching. We provide links to other databases and checklists. So for example, Trismegistos, the checklist of Bélanger Sarrazin, Ancient Christian Magic, Papyri Graecae Magicae, Supplementum Magicum, the Paths database, in a few cases where we have overlap. We note collection history, date, again, very problematic. We do try to note the date and what we know about it. We note the form, dimensions, language, dialect, find spot, state of preservation, and then we provide the content and bibliography. Yep, so I mean, it's more or less probably exactly what you'd expect, but the idea is to provide you with all information which, or provide us with all the information which we need, which is hopefully also the information which you need, and occasionally we will add things to this. So for example, recently I became interested in column widths, and so we added a field for that, particularly in the case of roles. In terms of the texts, so not all of this will be made public, but again, we have basic information on language and dialect, on text position. So we provide a papyrological edition, a translation, an apparatus, and then any notes which are necessary to the interpretation of the text. There's a very primitive form of tagging which we use. So essentially we add a series of keywords by category here, which is really for people within the project to use at the moment. And also any people mentioned in the text are named. So for example, if there's a copyist or a client or a victim named in the text, we will note their name and provide a link to the equivalent TM people ID. Archives, again, the information is fairly basic, but the main purpose is to gather together manuscripts which belong together and allow them to be studied jointly. Images, this is something which is quite experimental. This is something which we're experimenting with, but the goal is to include the images, of course, magical images, to provide tracings of these images, to describe their physical position and dimensions. And then we're experimenting with ways in which to describe these by keywords to allow them to be searchable. So again, this is something which will not be available to the public straight away, but over the course of the next few years, we hope to make this more accessible and more thoroughly available. Toponyms, I mean, this is really drawing information from Trismegistos places, essentially, but the purpose is really to allow us to gather together text from a single site. At the moment, we have the Trismegistos toponym and the topographical bibliography toponym, but we're hoping to incorporate paths, and perhaps we'll now think about Wikipedia. Now we've been introduced to the concept of wikification. The hands database, again, our study of the hands of the texts is at a fairly basic stage, but our ultimate goal is to contain a list of all of the hands that appear in these manuscripts, because we have a relatively small corpus, to provide datings and also to provide sample images of these hands, only some of which you see there, unfortunately. So at this point, I'll show you what our in-development online database looks like, which you'll be able to access in October this year. So this is our website, for those of you who don't know it already. At the moment, if you click on the database, all you will see is this brief description and a description of the structure, but hopefully within a few months, this will direct straight to the manuscripts page, which will be the landing page. Of course, we have our blog where we have various entries on various subjects. We have the podcast. Some of you may be interested in the bibliography, so we've tried to gather together all of the works which are relevant to the study of Coptic magic, all of the primary editions, but of course all of the general works, and where possibly provided URLs to find them online. And online resources, I think many of the projects represented here will be on this page, but we also have several links that are more specifically related to magic. So in terms of the database and its future appearance, we've tried to keep things as simple as possible to make it as accessible to the general public. So as I said, Coptic magic is often of interest to people who are not papyrologists or Copticists. So the goal is really to make the information as clear as possible. So essentially it will contain the sigla, a description of the contents and the form of the manuscript, and of course links to online images and to other relevant databases. We will have a search form, which will hopefully allow you to do a free search or to search by siglum, Kyprianos ID, date, etc. This is likely to be fairly restrictive, at least in the early stages, but the goal is that as time passes, we make it more and more powerful as a search tool. And of course, the manuscripts can simply be browsed if you're just wanting to get a general idea of their contents. And we'll have the same for texts and for archives. This is what the editions are likely to look like online. Let me see. Yes, so that's a very, very quick introduction to our database. We're very interested in collaborations. We're a small team, and we do have we've already got a lot on our plate, but we're very interested in collaborating. We've already talked to the TLA and the Digital Testament and to DEMA about the possibility of collaboration and data sharing. In the future, we're very interested in metadata tagging. The magical papyri is a very interesting corpus from a linguistic point of view. It's very non-standard, and we have texts in several minor dialects, but even the texts in Sahidic and Fayumic are often very different to the literary Fayumic and Sahidic. There's often a lot of similarities to documentary texts. Crum noted certain archaisms in the magical text, and so it'll be interesting to explore those in a more systematic way. And perhaps text reuse studies could be an interesting way to begin to look at these. It'd be very interesting to look at entities. So we have a lot of supernatural persons that appear in our texts, and it could be very interesting to explore ways to tag these. There is the Cenob database, which was a previous attempt to create a list of voces magicae, nomina barbara, which appear in magical texts. But because we will very soon have a complete coverage of at least the Coptic corpus and hopefully eventually the Greek and Demotic corpus, it could be interesting to try to extract that information and make it available to people who are interested in perhaps the names of demons and angels and how their occurrences and changes over time. We're also very interested in characteras. So characteras are these weird letters or symbols which appear in texts. Part of our work in the images is trying to find a way to standardize the classification of these. I didn't mention, but one of the outputs of our project is going to be a published edition of all of the magical texts. But one thing that could be helpful for that publication is to produce essentially a characteras font. And for that, it would be useful to produce a Unicode set with perhaps variations. So we're particularly inspired by the work of Richard Gordon, which sees characteras as being derived from standard Greek and Coptic letters, which then have variations in the numbers of circles added, for example, or rotation. So we're currently thinking about ways in which characteras could be classified in a meaningful way. And of course, in terms of loan words, we have a lot of Greek words, but also a lot of Arabic words. And so we have an informal collaboration already with the DDGLC project, but that's something which we're always interested in developing. And of course, word sense tagging, which I discovered today, seems like a very interesting tool for us because there's a lot of words which are very polysemic in the magical texts. So thank you very much for your attention. And I look forward to hearing your questions and comments.
Okay, thank you, Koshi. It's so exciting to know the progress of the Kipling's database. Yeah, I'm very glad that you mentioned the text reuses. Maybe probably there are many text reuses among magics. And I'm also very curious about the transmission of magics between languages, among cultures, etc. And I think it's also very nice to visualize the transmissions, etc. And there are so many. I
apologize, Frank. I'm wearing a pair of cheap headphones, so I'm sorry if you couldn't hear me properly.
Yeah, there are many questions from Amir Zeldes. Is the raw data of the magical text available? If so, under what license? In what format?
So it's not available yet. Once we start putting it online, it will be. So as I mentioned, we're not happy with a lot of the previous editions that we have been produced of the magical texts. So we're producing editions from scratch, obviously taking into account previous work that's been done on them. And so we will put them online gradually. As I said, I'm hoping to put about 20 texts online as of October, and we hope to gradually put more and more online until we ultimately have all 1,000 or so magical texts online by the end of the project. They're just in Unicode at the moment, we're looking into the exact license, but it'll probably be shared with attribution. So we're hoping to make it Creative Commons. But we just need to check with our university lawyers that they're happy with that.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah. So from Paula Vega, great work, by the way. You mentioned 53 medical texts. Are those previously never published? If so, who has taken a look at them? Any hints so far on what diseases they focus on? Or if there are manuals for doctors or herbaria?
These 53, I think, have all been published. So Sebastian Richter produced a checklist in a work called Neue Koptische Mediziner Texte, I think, which I can share in the chat, perhaps after I finish my talk. They're currently being studied by Anne Krons, who's part of the DDGLC project. And I think she's actually just written an article which gives an overview of them, which will hopefully be published in the near future. They're all available. I think there's one by Chassis now, which is available on archive.org, but many of the more recently published ones are also available online. There's lots of diseases, lots of eye diseases, fever, skin diseases, pretty much any kind of disease you can think of. There are manuals for doctors. I think there are also herbaria, but I think there's less of them. Yes, so I think Sebastian Richter's work that he's published on the medical text is a good place to start for those, but also keep an eye on the work of Anne Krons, which will be forthcoming.
Okay, and from Elise Sophia Linke, as for the images, it would be great to annotate them with semantic information, there are tools for this. The one I know is called hyperimage. Do you also use that? Or,
no. So I mean, at the moment, our method is very, very primitive, but I will look into that. So basically, our primary restriction now is, I guess, technical expertise and time. So all of us, in addition to our work, also have teaching responsibilities. So there's a lot of juggling that happens. Yeah, so perhaps once we have the database online, our IT person can have a look at that and think about how we could perhaps integrate it.
Okay, the next question is from Laura Slaughter. Is it possible to get the schema for the database?
So do you mean the FileMaker schema?
Probably on MySQL, I don't know.
Yeah, so it's a FileMaker database at the moment. If you're interested, perhaps if you could send me an email, I can send you a screenshot of our schema. It's fairly primitive, but we're always happy to share it and get feedback on ways to improve it. And yes, I'd love to collaborate on text reuse. Thank you.
Great. Yeah, Laura said, yes, I can send you an email. Thanks. Okay. And from Miriam Wissa, Dr. Dosu, this is a fully inclusive, excellent project. Archaeological artifacts are paramount, as you rightly mentioned, amulets such as the so-called Coptic dolls speak volume about magic.
Yeah, so we do want to include archaeological objects as well. So we've got a few of the amulets, so the magical gems in our database already. We'd like to include more. I think we actually do have one of the so-called Louvre voodoo doll as well. The Coptic dolls perhaps are something for a bit later down the line, because there's quite a lot of them and they're not perhaps directly related to our project. But yes, I think archaeological objects as well as kind of text containers would be very good to include in our database. So yeah, I think I want to include everything which could relate to our material, but we're also trying to focus on our core group of texts and then expand outwards from that.
Okay, and Miriam wrote a response as regards disease and cure. I am afraid the look into ancient Egyptian magic would be very informative. Okay.
Yeah, certainly.
And Paula Vega, wrote a response. Exciting. Yes, it's truly exciting. Yes. And Sebastian Richter, how do you deal with the corruptibility of Voces Magicae or Voces Magicae and the resulting range of variety? Do you try to employ standard forms?
So that kind of tagging is at a very early stage, but yeah. So the hope is that we, so even something like Raphael or Raguel can have multiple forms. So when we include it in our list of cultural figures, is how we classify these figures at the moment. We try to include a standard form and then in brackets the particular spelling. But that's something which we're going to be having to think about more as we get into it. And perhaps we'll introduce another table for, I guess, entities, we could call it, or cultural figures. And then we'll have to think more seriously about how to encode variations in forms. And if you have any suggestions for that, perhaps we could talk about your suggestions. I mean, I think the DDGLC provides a potentially good model for that.
Right. Namia said it's fantastic. Yes. And Elisa Sofia Linke, university lawyers are never happy. And Christina Hebesi asked, maybe I have just missed it, but how complete is the database now? Do you know about any magical manuscripts that have not yet been included in the database?
So for Coptic magical texts, no. So every Coptic magical text I'm aware of is in the database, published and unpublished. There may be ones I don't know about, and so if I find out about them, I put them in. In terms of other material in other languages, so Greek, Latin, Aramaic, Hebrew, Arabic, I'm keeping a separate document where I try to keep track of them, and they'll be added later. But yeah, I mean, the goal is that when the database is online, we have a contact form, which is very easy to use. So we hope that people will contact us and let us know if they notice any gaps in the database, either bibliographical or in terms of its contents. But I think for Coptic magical text, it's fairly complete. So the largest database which exists, checklist was that of Roxane Bélanger-Sarrazin, which had 304 entries. And I think ours now contains 556. So it's quite large at the moment. And I'm sure there are texts out there we don't know about, but I think we have fairly good coverage so far of Coptic magical material.
Okay, and from Gun Hyuk Lee, it is so interesting. Thank you. By the way, which software did you use for making this database regarding with mentioning of ethics?
So we just use FileMaker at the moment because it's easy to use for somebody who doesn't have a lot of technical ability in coding, and also it's very flexible. So the database has kind of changed form over time. We've added tables and added fields, and that'll probably continue to happen. I mean, over the course of our project. But I mean, yes, we're very open to suggestions from people who know more about databases than us.
Okay, the next question is from, it is written in Arabic, Asmahan Abu al-Sa'ad. Sometimes the magic was written in Greek, Coptic, and Arabic with many drawings or images of faces or scorpion or snakes. Is it a comment or? Yeah.
Yes, that's very true. We have a few of those in our database. There's a good article by Lajos Barkes recently where he talked about an Arabic example. And I think he gave a list of like Greek and Coptic examples. And I think there's also a Hebrew example where you have scorpion amulets. Yeah.
Okay, and Sebastian Richtero, there is so far just one herbarium type of Coptic magical text, starting out from plant name lemata and assigning therapeutic effect to them, a miniature size codex from the Copenhagen collection edited by Gabriel Eriksen, and a few additional pages by myself. Okay. And finally, Vincent Walter, concerning your work on the different hands employed in Coptic magical texts, are you planning to do some more systematic work in this regard, maybe establishing different paleographical types of hands? Any advancements to the sadly understudied paleography of non-literary Coptic texts would be awesome.
Yep, so I think we have quite a nice small corpus within which we have perhaps a dozen texts which can be well dated, and the vast majority of which are very, very poorly dated. So yes, so that's one of our goals perhaps in the next year or so, to produce typology of the hands, and then to compare those to datable hands. And I think we'll be seeking help from people who have done great work so far. So obviously Agnes Mihaliko and Boudor, and anybody else interested in helping us out would be great. But yes, we're really hoping that we can develop some kind of meaningful typology of the hands, because the dating at the moment is really unsatisfactory, I would say.
Okay, great. As Frank Feder pointed out, yeah, we are losing the time frame. We are behind the time, so.
Yeah, so sorry for that, but thanks for your questions. It was very, very interesting.
Okay, thank you so much, Koshi.
All right, we're actually only 5 minutes behind schedule, but I'm wondering if we want to have the break now and then have Katharina Schröder's talk, or should we just have that straight? I don't know what people's endurance is like. What do you think so?
Yeah, I'm not so sure. Since we are also late on day one, I think it's all right to have a break. But what do you think? But we have only one talk, so.
What about 5 minutes break instead of 10?
Yeah, that's also nice. Yeah. Why not? Yeah.
Okay, so let's break for 5 minutes and come back here at 5 past.
Okay.
Okay, should we start again?
The chair of the last session is Lance, I think.
And so for our last speaker, we have Katharina Schroeder, who will be speaking to us about Coptic in the ECM and the nt.vmr Munster. Katharina, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much for adding me to the program. It was late, but not too late. I will attempt to share my screen. Wait, can you hear me all right with the microphone? Guess that's a yes. So I will give a short overview of our project and the database. And after that, I will attempt a live demonstration of the New Testament virtual manuscript room. I hope that works out with the screen sharing. When I refer to us and I say we do this and that, that's always my colleague Siegfried Richter and I. We are the two Coptologists at the INTF, and we have a couple of student assistants as well. So the project is the Editio Critica Major. It's a large-scale academy project that has been based at the INTF since 2007. It is a new edition of the Greek New Testament, taking into consideration for the first time all available manuscript material and working with newly developed digital methods, among them the coherence-based genealogical method. According to these new standards, the Catholic letters were published in its second revised edition in 2013, followed by the Acta Apostolorum in 2017. We are now working on the Gospel of Mark, after that Matthew, and then Luke, if everything goes to schedule. Not all parts of the ECM are based in Münster. The Gospel of John is in Birmingham, with the Coptological department, if you want, in Vienna. That's our colleagues Hans Förster and Matthias Schulz. The Revelation is in Wuppertal with Christian Askeland, responsible for the Coptic, and other parts are set up internationally as well. I will be talking about Acts mostly because that's finished. So the ECM is a new edition. In its critical apparatus, the edition includes the versional evidence of the Latin, Syriac, and Coptic traditions, as well as some minor versions like Gothic and Ethiopic, as well as the Greek patristic citations where, quote, it can possibly contribute to establishing the Greek text or to its history, end quote. I can't, oh, I can. This is what a page of the ECM looks like. Well, it's the upper part of a page because it's too large to fit on one slide. At the top of the page, you have a guiding line with the word addresses and the variants underneath. And this is the lower part of the page with the critical apparatus. What follows the Greek text of a variant is obviously the witnesses attesting it, among them the versional evidence, and you see here Coptic, Bohairic, and Mesochemic. These dialects go back to this Greek reading, while down here variant B has only metatauta instead of entais, esetas, imares, and Coptic Sahidic goes back to that. In the text critical work on Acts, we included all Sahidic manuscripts and fragments that were known to us and usable, as well as all Fayumic fragments and the Mesochemic Codex Glacier. For the citation of the Bohairic dialect, we used George Horner's critical edition. In order to be able to match the Coptic tradition into the apparatus of the ECM, it is first of all necessary to collect all the relevant manuscripts. Several lists and overviews of Coptic witnesses to the New Testament have been compiled at the INTF, and I'm going to skip all this to have more time for the VMR later. I only say that in 2010, all these existing items and information was transferred to an digital form the SMR database of Coptic New Testament manuscripts. And here I will already leave my PowerPoint. Can you still see everything I do? I hope so. Yeah. I trust that somebody yells if it's not working anymore. So the easiest way to find our databases is to just Google INTF. Or this is not Google, but a search engine of your choice. This is the website. Down to the right, you have the SMR database. The database aims at containing every Coptic manuscript, however fragmentary, that is a witness to the New Testament. It includes manuscripts in Sahidic, Fayumic, Mesochamic, Achmimic, and some other minor dialects. And it's constantly growing. Bohairic was excluded for the time being because the large number of manuscripts, it's much more than we can handle at the INTF. So this is an introduction with versional updates. The latest additions to the database can always be seen here. And there's a bunch of material up here. It's all in German, I'm afraid. For example, you have material about dating, bilingual manuscripts, and material. And if you click on research, that's the actual database. You can select an SMR number, Biblia Coptica number, a Horner siglum, or you can search for collection. Or you can browse by Bible passage and, for example, show me all the manuscripts that contain 1 Thessalonians. And so that's a list of Thessalonians. And this is what a database entry looks like. The database started off as a concordance for SMR and Biblia Coptica numbers, Horner, Ziegler, and Gregory Ireland numbers, but it quickly grew to become much more. It lists now repositories and inventory numbers, as well as Bible passage, information about material, critical article, details, origins, and dates assigned in the secondary literature. We do not assign our own dates, as well as editions. Most of the information you have right here. The metadata like page layout and that is attached as a PDF entry. So this, sorry. For the ECM of Acts, we collected manuscripts in this database. Then we transcribed them from images and where applicable, we collated against available editions. And then we assigned the Coptic tradition into the apparatus of the Greek variants. And this is where we will leave to the VMR. And the easiest way is to go back to the Institute's website. Down here to the right is NTVMR. Or you can just search with Google or something, and the first search result will lead you here. So, New Testament Virtual Manuscript Room. The first thing is Liste. And you can look up here every manuscript that's in here. You can search for a specific manuscript. You can search for all kinds of details like language. You can search for features like show me all the manuscripts that have illuminated letters. If you close this, you can also hit browse and it will just give you a list of everything that's there. But I would like to look at all Greek Coptic bilingual manuscripts. And this is a list. It gives you the database entry with all information there is available, with inventory numbers, and down here also links to Trismegistos, for example, and bibliography. You can assign favorites here. So you just click the star and it will give out your own list of favorites, so you don't need to search for manuscripts always again. So that's Liste. The second thing we hit is workspace. And to see the setup, let's select one manuscript from my favorites, which is the Sinaiticus. And you have the indexed pages here to the left with a little thumbnail image. You can click on that. We'll show the image here. and the transcription next to that. It's a 4-column manuscript, and it gives the columns underneath each other, but I think that's okay. You can zoom in, you can do all kinds of other things like invert the image. It doesn't always need so long. You can also open the image in another tab, which is very convenient if you want to look at several manuscripts at the same time, or you want to compare, I don't know, the leftmost column with the rightmost column, so you can zoom in here and here. So that's how that works. Close that again. And this is the ideal situation, right? We have the indexed pages, we have an image and a transcription. In some cases, there is no index, or there is no image, or there is no transcription. But whether there's a transcription or not, of course, also depends on the content of any given manuscript, because most of the time you don't make transcriptions only just for fun, but also because projects need them. And depending on the project, this or that content is preferred. And this being the Sinaiticus, it should have John down here, Gospel of John. And you see, for example, there are 2 separate transcriptions available. One is made by the INTF. The other one is made by the International Greek New Testament Project. They are, as I said, affiliated with the ECM of John. So they have separate transcriptions. They made their own. Of course, in large parts, they are identical, but there are a couple of things that each project does differently. So it's always worth to consider which project is behind the material that you see here. There is a lot of Greek in the VMR. There is not so much Coptic to this day. It's growing, but it's still not built up as much as the Greek. We can here on the manuscripts search for all Sahidic manuscripts that are here. We look at ZA1, for example, the beautiful, as soon as the picture shows, very beautiful Barcelona Gospel Codex. So it's the same setup, right? Index pages and the image and the transcription. But yeah, all in all, it's less Coptic material online. Most of what you find in here will be Gospel of John and Revelation. That's simply because our colleagues in Vienna have done a lot of work on that. Vienna is John, and Christian Escaland is also an important force in the VMR, and that's, as I said, ECM Revelation. There is nothing on Acts available in the VMR until now. We are uploading a bit of material for Mark at the moment, and eventually we want to use, well, so there is nothing on Acts because we didn't use the system here for producing our transcriptions. What the Greek side of the project does and did, and we would like to do that in the future, but it's not yet happening, but we'll get there. So this has been the workspace. This is where all the material is stored, at least for the Greek. And now we come to the edition of the ECM. And the first thing to note is it says ECM in the margin here, but this feature, this site lets you access the entire New Testament, so not only Acts. But if you put in Matthew, for example, it will give you a caveat that ECM data is only available for Acts and everything else is the edition of Nestle Aland 28. But let's look at Acts. And what you see here is the new Greek text of the new edition, as well as the critical apparatus, just as it is in print. It's the same layout and everything. And that's due to the courtesy or even generosity of the German Bible Society, who is our publisher, and who gave the permission to openly publish the material in this way. And having this online is a large step towards developing the ECM into an open interactive platform for scholars to exchange information and opinions and pursue their own questions and answers to the material, and also to communicate and share progress. And it's quite interactive, which I will show you. But first, if you click on a Greek word, for examples, it gives you the dictionary entry of Liddell Scott. It's quite convenient. Now I have to unselect the word and look for a specific verse. So if you hover with the cursor over a given variant passage, it highlights the thing in the upper text in red, which I find very convenient. It's something you can't have in print. And so I have the Greek variant passage here. Word 12, that's the Kai. And it lists here all the Greek witnesses for Kai. And if I click on one, it will give me the transcription with a little arrow as to indicate the space where exactly I am in the transcription. And then if I hit this button, it leads me, when it's loaded and everything works, right to the image. So we are still in the VMR. That's where we just were, ECM, and now this is a link to the workspace. So you have the image to check every given Greek witness. This does not work for the versions, but I'll show you the alternatives. Every variation passage has a built-in discussion thread. There is nothing here. No discussion has yet started. If we click here, there is a discussion. And we are still in the VMR. ECM is where we just were, and this is now a link to the forum. And to this variation passage, Klaus Wachtel has started discussion, and this is all open, available, and everybody can get involved. You can also access information on stemma and coherence. For a given variant passage, it gives the full verse here again, and then it goes on to very specific information on the relationship of the Greek manuscripts among each other, which is very exciting for people involved in the textual criticism of the New Testament. But yeah, I don't know so much about that. So back to the edition. What else do we have? CIT is for citations, and it leads you to the database of patristic citations of the Institute in Münster. It gives you a list of all the authors and their works that cite this passage. And if you click on one, it leads you to the database entry with all the information about author, available editions, and it gives you, the citation in context, which is of course very important. What else? We have VL, it stands for Vetus Latina. That is material of the Universität Mainz, and it gives you the Latin witnesses of a given passage. Very neatly organized. One other feature is conjectures available for a given verse. If you click on this, it leads you to the Amsterdam database of New Testament conjectural emendations. That's by Jan Kranz mainly. And it gives you the conjectures of the given verse. But we are still in the VMR, as you see here, workspace, we've been there, ECM, we've been there. This is the link to conjectures. And you have access here to the entire New Testament. So this is not limited to Acts, and it's not limited to the verse. Sorry, I need to put in a chapter. My mouse doesn't work. Oh, I don't. Okay. Sorry, my mouse seems to make a bit of trouble. Conjectures. And now back to the Coptic. We see here variant A is Chi only. It has a lot of Greek witnesses. It has church fathers, Latin witnesses, and this means Coptic and Sahidic. And this MSS means a part of the Sahidic tradition goes back to variant A. Variant B has Kai Theos instead of Kai only. C is Kai Hotheos. And down here, we see assigned to variant B and or C, we don't know, could be both, some Latin witnesses and Coptic Sahidic, the other part of the Sahidic tradition, as well as Bohairic and Mesochemic. There is this little triangle here, and also after MSS up here. This means that there's a note available on this variation passage of this dialect here that you can't access here in the online edition. You need the printed volume of the supplementary material that you don't have here. Sorry about that. Also, this is here part of the Sahidic tradition. This is the other part. If you want to know which manuscripts are in which group, you also need the supplementary material. Sorry. But if you want to know what the Coptic behind this is, you click on VC. Well, this is Vetus Latina. This is Versio Coptica. It's a bit confusing. Sorry about that. And this gives you the new edition of the Coptic Acts of the Apostles. I have the numbers for you here. So you can access here 29 Coptic witnesses for the 1,006 verses and 18,450 words of the 28 chapters of Acts. And you can check all the 26,000 something textual variants that were included. This is useful not only to verify or challenge the assigned Coptic tradition, but also to check the Coptic text in passages where it is not cited in the apparatus. As I mentioned, it is not cited everywhere, but only in places that were deemed interesting for various reasons for the Greek text and its history, right? But you have the material here and can check all the other, I don't know how many thousand variant passages. So what we have here is are the Sahidic witnesses. This is the main text of Horner's Bohairic edition. And after that, the Mesochemic and or Fayumic witnesses where they are available. And this is for chapter 3, verse 13. It's only one verse per page. If you want to skip to the next one, you can do that here. Well, I have this. Can I move this? Okay. You can skip here to the next verse. You have an introduction here. It's the same English and German. It tells you what this is, who was involved. It gives you an apparatus of each manuscript or of those manuscripts where we have some information. And this will mostly be ancient corrections and our emendations, as well as differences in reading if there is an edition available and our reading differs. This also gives a list of manuscripts that we used. It also contains the manuscripts that we did not use for whatever reason, and the reason is down here as well. Somewhere it's a lot. Did I miss it? No, it's manuscripts of which only some parts were used. Okay, no, I did miss something. That were only recorded to their editions because we didn't have images available. Yeah, so that's the introduction. We have here in the middle a link to the SMR online database that you already know. We have a link to the award-winning Coptic Dictionary Online that we heard already today, which is really amazing. And we have, as a latest edition, a link to Horner's Bohairic. edition, so you can check the variant passages also with the Bohairic witnesses. Yeah, and the format of this Coptic edition is the line version, inspired by Swanson's edition of the New Testament manuscripts, but a critical edition is in preparation. It will just take some more time. This is the ECM of Acts, available for everyone freely. We hope to be able to set up an online edition for the Gospel of Mark as well. The material for that is due for printed publication next year, but a possible online publication, of course, depends on permission of the German Bible Society and the legal agreements that are necessary for these things. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you for that talk. We have a few minutes for questions, so please type them in the chat box. Perhaps, Katharina, you can start off. Frank mentions in the comment that eventually there will be a combined view of the Coptic Old Testament and New Testament in the VMR. Can you elaborate on that and just kind of go into detail of what that will look like once it comes out?
Yeah. The agreement is that our two manuscripts room, if you want, are, don't know what the English word is, but that it's the same, it's digitally mirrored somehow, synchronized, that you have the same information on both websites. So you can go to either manuscript room and it will have the same information.
Great. A question from Elise Sophia Linke. She asks, please tell me all these Coptic witness PDFs are in Unicode. Is this the case or not?
Yes, it's anti-no font.
Okay, great. I have one question. So the 92 witnesses you mentioned, do they include passages from lectionaries, or are these simply books to,
Yes.
Book of Acts bound?
Yes, they do include lectionaries. Sometimes we have lectionaries where the same passage is twice, and we have labeled that A and B of the same manuscript. It includes everything but citations and amulets like that. Well, for Acts, it's not so important, but now that we are at the Gospel of Mark, like incipits of Mark are cited on several other materials, and we would not include that. Only what comes from what we call the codex.
Okay.
But lectionaries definitely.
Great, thank you. And is the raw data available for the Coptic Acts?
I mean images, is that the raw material?
I believe the linear version.
Sorry, say again, what?
The linear version of Coptic Acts?
Well, yeah, it's what I just showed you. It's a PDF. You can basically download that and use that if you like.
Great.
Yeah. Images are not available, but we hope that at some point we will have the time to upload them to the VMR. So that will be available as well.
And Sebastian Richter asks, how do you deal with the paleography and dating issue?
We don't deal with that. We completely ignore that. We have in the database the slot for dating, and we put in what the secondary literature reports, but we don't put that to any further use.
And a clarification on the previous question, I believe Unicode was meant, the TXT or XML. Is that available?
I don't know what you mean. What's the XML? I know nothing about these things, so I know it's in the VMR, but I don't know the digital structure underneath.
at least Sophia, do you want to elaborate?
Yeah, I see all hail Troy. Yeah, you can ask Troy, he made this.
Okay. Very good. And Frank Fetter says that this would be part of the metadata in the manuscript catalog. I believe that's referring to the paleography and dating issue.
Yes, yes, certainly.
If there are no further questions, then we'll conclude. Thank you, Katharina, for your talk. It's very illuminating. Amir, do you want to say a few words in closing?
Yeah, so we've gone a little bit over time, but I think it was worth it. I'm really glad we had this second day and a lot of wonderful presentations. I guess I don't want to keep anyone up, especially in the Eastern Hemisphere, too much. So I'm not sure we should propose another break since we just had our 5 minutes. It's been kind of a breakneck day, but really that was the only way to be able to get so many presentations into just 2 days in this brief window that we have when most people dealing with Coptic are awake because there are so few people living in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. But basically, I'd like to thank all of you for coming and participating. It's been wonderful. Any of you who want to share your slides online, please send them to So or me, and we'll put them on the website for the workshop so that we can have that for the future, for posterity. And please don't treat this as the end. Please stay in touch. I'm sure we'll have a Digital Coptic 4 at some point. And I'm hoping we'll have IACS at some point also in person, at which point we might all meet as well. So stay in touch. Please let us know if there's any materials you want to put up online. Oh, thank you everyone for the kind words on the chat. For those of you who want to stay for the presenter discussion, it's the same link as yesterday. And I will see you there shortly. I promise to keep it short because some of you need to go to sleep. So thank you again for your patience. See you, everyone.
Thank you so much, everyone. See you at Digital Coptic 4.